Chapter 165. Hua Xiaoduo has given birth. The nth couple that I've matched with in my novel has sent good news. Merit. Congratulations, I wish the baby good health and you two can be happy for a lifetime. Actually, I don't want to live in the imperial city. Standing by the railing, Li Zhongyi, the Tang emperor, raised his hand and pointed to the dark blue city wall in the distance in the north. He said with emotion, "You will reach the Daming Palace after a few miles out of the city. There are green mountains and dense forests there, and the wind is cool. It will be much cooler there in the summer, and you don't have to listen to those ministers quarrel in the court. No one will bother you every day, and it will be much more relaxing." After dinner, the emperor took Ning Ke for a walk around the palace. It was called a stroll, but it was actually just a chat. At this time, the sky had just turned dark, and the lights in Chang'an had been lit early. There were still many sceneries as far as the eye could see. Ning Ke stood beside the emperor and looked at the side of his face. He wondered why the emperor would say such a sigh to him. Could it be that it was really difficult for the emperor to find someone to chat with when he was trapped in the deep palace? He didn't have time to carefully analyze what problems were hidden in this treatment. He thought of the hot weather in Chang'an last year and had a strong feeling of sympathy. He said respectfully, "Then your majesty should move out of the city as soon as possible this year." The emperor put his sleeves behind him and looked at the night sky of the imperial city. He sighed and said, "In the early years, when the former empress said that she wanted to move to the Daming Palace, the ministers would cry bitterly. They didn't dare to say that I was neglecting the political affairs, but they had to talk about the ancestral rules. Although I am the emperor of the Tang Empire, I often have no choice but to choose a place to live. Finally, no one dares to disobey me in these years. But even if I want to move, I have to wait until the summer to shut those old guys' mouth." Ning Ke could not help but secretly laugh when he heard the hidden bitterness in the emperor's words. The emperor suddenly turned around and looked at him with great interest. He said, "This year, I and the empress will move to the Daming Palace. Why don't you go with us and stay for a few days? Little Yuer always thinks that the outside of the city is empty and boring, but in fact the scenery is very beautiful." The smile on Ning Ke's face disappeared very quickly. He felt a little awkward when he heard these words. It was not like an emperor inviting a favored minister to rest in the palace. His tone was tranquil and casual, like an old farmer in the countryside who suddenly saw a young relative in the county and invited him to his farmhouse to eat some fruits, boasting that the well water was quite sweet. His Majesty had invited him to spend the summer in the Daming Palace. He knew very well what it meant. Since there was an emperor in the world, there was a royal palace. Since there was a royal palace, there were court officials. These people who were close to the emperor had a noble status and were respected by the people. Although they were not involved in court affairs, they had a great influence on court affairs. Although their salary was low, they could earn countless taels of silver just by writing some poems. If it was in the past, Ning Ke would certainly be willing to be such a noble minister. However, he was no longer a young soldier in the border town. In addition to money and future, he also saw the mysterious world. Naturally, he was not willing to be a minister anymore. "Your Majesty, I don't deserve your kindness. It is a wonderful thing to have your Majesty instructing me in calligraphy day and night." Ning Ke bowed respectfully with his hands folded in front. He peeped at his Majesty's face and said, "To be honest, who doesn't want to be outstanding and bring honor to their ancestors? But I just entered the second floor and haven't seen the headmaster yet. It's really inconvenient. I just said it casually. You don't have to be so serious." His Majesty smiled and said, "There are many untruths in your words. I don't want to criticize you. But why doesn't Qiao Xiaoshu want to be outstanding?" Ning Ke did not know how to answer and kept silent. His Majesty suddenly looked at him and asked, "Do you know where second brother Qiao is now?" "I really don't know where brother Qiao is," Ning Ke replied. His Majesty walked to the railing and stroked the cold stone railing with his slender palm. He looked at the palace under the night sky and said softly after a moment of silence, "There is a school of palace resentment poems in the past, such as red leaves on the palace walls and old palace maids and so on. But who knows that the palace is so deep, not only the palace maids and concubines are locked up, but also me. Now that I think about it, when I was the crown prince, I often went to Chang'an to play and broke into the Spring Breeze Pavilion with Little Chen and fought with Chao Xiaoshu. It's really an irretrievable past." Listening to His Majesty reminiscing about the past, Ning Ke felt bitter in his mouth. He wondered why he had heard all these thoughts of royalty. He had just written a calligraphy section, and today was the first time he had seen His Majesty. How could he be qualified to bear such trust? As if sensing Ning Ke's doubts, the Emperor turned his head and looked at him with a faint smile. "Chao Xiaoshu is the one I like, and you are the one Chao Xiaoshu liked. I took a fancy to Chao Xiaoshu, so there was the name Spring Breeze Pavilion. Chao Xiaoshu took a fancy to you, so you followed him to the Spring Breeze Pavilion for a night of killing. Later, you were sent to the secret guard by him, so you could enter my imperial study. You left that piece of calligraphy in my imperial study, so I know you." These words seem to be roundabout and unclear, but they only mean one thing. Ning Ke knew that he could not keep silent at this time and had to join in the fun. So he hurriedly asked, "What does it mean?" The Emperor smiled and said, "It means that there is some fate between you and me, just like between me and Chao Xiaoshu." Fate was a good word. Ning Ke thought happily in his heart. The Emperor of the Tang Empire thought that there was fate between him and Ning Quebec. Then in the secular world, he would have an amulet or even a card to avoid death. Many things in the future would be much smoother. The Emperor looked at him and said with a faint smile, "Since there is fate between me and you should not be so stingy. Bring more of the calligraphy in the shop to the palace for me to see. Just take it that I am borrowing it from you." Fate was not a good word. Ning Ke thought painfully in his heart. As the saying goes, once you enter the palace, you will be as deep as the sea. If those calligraphy that were like silver notes entered the imperial study, how could they see the light of day again? As for borrowing, it was even worse. If the Emperor of the Tang Empire borrowed something from you, would you have the face to ask him to return it? At this time, he could not refuse His Majesty's request to borrow his calligraphy. One had to know that as the Emperor of the Great Tang, he had the right and strength to be unreasonable to anyone. But today, the Emperor had invited him to a meal and had a heart-to-heart talk with him. Not only did he reason with him for half a day, he even began to talk about friendship and fate. How could he refuse? Ning Ke raised his head and said resolutely, "Tomorrow, I will send the works of these years to the palace for guidance, Your Majesty." The Emperor was full of comfort and stroked his long beard. He looked at the young man in front of him and nodded slightly, thinking that he was not an idiot to the extreme. The determination on Ning Ke's face quickly turned into sadness and sadness in the next moment. He looked at the Emperor and said bitterly, "So Your Majesty is waiting for me here. The Tang Empire values the law. Even if I am the Emperor, I can't take things from people by force." The Emperor smiled proudly. Looking at the painful expression on Ning Ke's face, he comforted him and said, "Of course, I will not take your things for nothing." Ning Ke heard this and became spirited. He thought that even if it was the cost price, the price of friendship and the price of fate, the Emperor would not be too stingy. The Emperor thought for a while and said, "Compared with your handwriting, it is too vulgar to give you some gold and silver." In Ning Ke's view, the most elegant and wonderful thing in the world was silver. As for gold, it could be classified as sacred. At this time, when he heard that His Majesty thought gold and silver were too vulgar, he could not help feeling disappointed. However, he could not say that it was not vulgar at this time, so he had to control his temper and listen to the Emperor. He thought that if he did not give him cash, it would be good to give some royal treasures, satin or makeup powder. Although he did not need them, Sang Sang would definitely like them. If there were leftovers, he could give them to those girls in the House of Red Sleeves. Of course, the Emperor did not know that Ning Ke was planning to give the royal gifts to the girls in the brothel. After thinking for a while, he suddenly thought of something and said with his eyes slightly brightened, Master Yen Sei has accepted you as a disciple and said that you have the potential to be a divine talisman master. There is just one thing in the palace that is suitable for you. Ning Ke asked curiously, Your Majesty, what is it? I can't show it to you now. Even if you see it, you won't understand it. The Emperor looked at him and said with a smile, When Master Yen Sei reports to me that you have really entered the talisman Taoism, I will give it to you. Ning Ke slightly frowned and thought, what is it that it should be related to one's cultivation? However, since His Majesty refused to say, he had to salute and thank the Emperor for the reward that he had not yet received and did not even know what it was. Seeing that it was getting late, he remembered the thing he had thought about before entering the palace and reported respectfully, Your Majesty, since I have now entered the second floor of the academy, should I resign from the job of a secret guard? After being slightly startled, the Emperor shook his head in an unquestionable manner to express his opposition. Looking into his eyes, he said, I have seen the file the Ministry of Military Affairs presented. Your performance in the frontier fortress and the wastelands was excellent, even exceeding my imagination. You are loyal to the Empire, take good care of your comrades, and are good at making decisions and killing people. I need a secret guard like you. But in the academy, I really don't know what to investigate. Ning Ke seemed to ask casually, but in fact, he wanted to find the answer that had been puzzling him for a year from His Majesty's answer. He wanted to know whether the imperial court was afraid of the academy or not, and whether he was a hidden card placed in the academy by the palace. The Emperor looked at him and unhappily scolded, Idiot! The academy is the foundation of the Tang Empire. Will I be stupid enough to shake the foundation of the empire? Who asked you to investigate the academy? I asked you to pay attention to those cultivators. Ning Ke acted like an idiotic loyal subject and hurriedly agreed. In fact, he still did not understand. If he studied in the academy, the cultivators he contacted were all students of the academy. How could he monitor other cultivators? As for being scolded as an idiot by His Majesty, he was even more resentful. He thought to himself that in this life, it was he who scolded others as idiots. For the sake of His Majesty, he would not argue with him. The Emperor's expression became slightly better and he said, In the future, you will learn from the headmaster of the academy on the second floor of the academy. It is a great opportunity. You must grasp it and work hard. Compared with your studies, the things I have entrusted to you can be put aside. After a short pause, the Emperor looked at him with a solemn expression and said, The future of the Tang Empire ultimately depends on young people like you. You used to be a glorious soldier of the Tang Empire's border army. Now you are my most trusted secret guard and a student of the headmaster of the academy. The Tang Empire will not bury you, and you can't let the Tang Empire lose face. Do you understand? Ning Ke heard the trust and respect in the Emperor's words. His heart trembled slightly and he replied, I understand. The Emperor turned his head to look at the palace outside the railing, which was as bright as the stars and candles. Lightly, he said, in the short term, I will not give you any official position in the court because the entire world now knows that I admire your calligraphy. Ning Ke did not understand what kind of logic this was. If I promote you, although it is because of your other abilities, in the eyes of the court officials, it is still a favor to you with calligraphy. Those guys can join in the fun with me, but when it comes to the imperial court, they will still think that calligraphy is useless. Although I don't care what the court officials and people think, I care what the historians will write. So I will not give you a high position and a high title, and I can't stay in my favorite daming palace for long. The emperor turned to look at him and said, "Because I don't want to be known as a fatuous ruler in the history books." Ning Ke cupped his hands and said sincerely, "Your Majesty is a wise ruler throughout the ages." The emperor smiled and joked, "This is the eternal flattery." Ning Ke laughed and did not feel embarrassed at all. After taking a walk around the palace, His Majesty had said all the things he wanted to say, expressed his emotions, and taken care of the calligraphy sections. Now it was time to part. His Majesty had specially instructed his favorite daughter to send Ning Ke out of the palace. It could be said that he had given Ning Ke enough face. Under the light of the palace lantern, two long shadows were leaning against each other on the flagstone. Ning Ke, who was one step behind, couldn't help laughing. Hearing his laughter, Li Yu looked at him in surprise. She looked at his expression and then at the shadows on the ground, guessing what he was laughing at. She couldn't help but frown and said in a low voice, "This is the palace, not the northern mountain road. Pay attention to your image." Facing Li Yu, Ning Ke did not have any psychological pressure at all. He said with a smile, "Your Highness, what are you talking about?" Walking out of the palace, they stood on the stone steps and stopped. Li Yu looked at him with a faint smile. Her beautiful face looked even more gorgeous under the palace lantern. "How many things are you hiding from me?" "There should be a lot." Ning Ke looked at her with a smile and said, "What do you want to know?" Li Yu said thoughtfully, "I want to know all of them." Ning Ke almost blurted out that she was so beautiful. Looking at the palace maids and old maidservants around him, he reacted in time and swallowed his sarcastic words. He said respectfully, "It will be a very long story. I guess Her Highness does not have that much time." Ning Ke pretended to be respectful, but in fact, his tone was still ordinary and casual. This kind of casual tone was equivalent to frivolous and rude to the princess of the Tang Empire. The palace maids and old maidservants on the stone steps had lived in the palace for a long time, so they were very experienced in observing and listening. There was no reason for them not to understand. Their expressions suddenly became extremely unnatural. If it was in normal times, the old maidservants would definitely come forward to reprimand them. However, today everyone had seen His Majesty's attitude towards Ning Ke and noticed that Her Highness did not feel disobedient at all. They could not help but have some deviations in their thinking. They turned their heads away without a trace and kept some distance from Her Highness. They did not listen to the conversation between the two and even used their cold eyes to approach the palace maids to lower their heads. Li Yu walked down the stone steps and approached Ning Ke with a smile. She said, "Speaking of time, if you have time in a few days, come to my mansion. I have heard many stories about you from Sangsang this year. I would like to hear your own story." Ning Ke knew that there was a strange affection between Sangsang and Her Highness that was beyond their social class and age. However, he firmly believed that Sangsang would never tell the secrets of his mission to outsiders. Li Yu's words were just to tease him. He smiled gently and replied, "Her Highness should know that I will be very busy in the future. I really do not know when I will have time." Li Yu frowned slightly and said, "I have time, but you don't?" Ning Ke looked at her quietly and suddenly asked softly, "Does Her Highness want to recruit me again?" Li Yu's expression was as calm as usual. She smiled and said, "Isn't that natural?" Hearing her answer so naturally, Ning Ke was startled. After a moment of silence, he said, "Now the price is different again." Li Yu smiled and shook her head. She said, "Last time, I was sorry that I did not see your true potential and underestimated your confidence. But this time, I think it should be different. Maybe I will give you a price that you can't refuse." Ning Ke looked at her beautiful face and said, "There are not many things in the world that I can't refuse. But Princess, you are indeed irresistible." Li Yu was slightly startled. There was anger in her eyes, but a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. However, Ning Ke's words had a double meaning. It could be said that he was frivolous and shameless, but it could also be said that he was respectful. She was embarrassed and did not know how to deal with him. After a moment, she looked at Ning Ke and smiled faintly. She said, "You are really beautiful." Ning Ke turned around and left angrily. He secretly regretted that he did not use it before. In the end, she stole it and used it. The little eunuch who was waiting outside the hall to take Ning Ke out of the palace was Lu Ji. After walking along the imperial garden for a long time, they finally saw the imperial city gate in the night. The swaying palace lanterns were far away from the eunuchs and palace maids walking through the halls. Lu Ji, who had been leading the way with his head down, slowed down his pace and said thank you in a low voice. Ning Ke knew what he was thanking for. He smiled and shook his head without saying anything. The deputy commander of the palace guards, Su Chongshan, was in charge of the night duty outside the imperial city gate. After a long and strict inspection, Ning Ke was finally taken to the duty room beside the imperial city gate. He put on his shoes and belt again. After that, he looked at the deputy commander by the window and said with a bitter smile, "Why do you have to do this?" There were only the two of them in the room. Su Chongshan's face was full of helplessness. He looked at him and bowed seriously. He said gratefully, "I have been worried for a whole day. Now that the illness is gone, I still have to thank you." Ning Ke looked at him, shook his head and said, "Lu Ji took me out of the palace. His Majesty must have known that you were on night duty here. I even thought that His Majesty might have specially given us some time so that we could check our statements." Su Chongshan said with deep regret, "Now that things have come to this, even if His Majesty has guessed something, I still can't say anything." Ning Ke looked at his nominal immediate superior and comforted him. He said, "Guessing and knowing are two different things after all." Su Chongshan walked over with his short and thick legs. He looked at him and said seriously, "If I really lose His Majesty's favor this time, I will have to rely on you from now on. My legs are short and I can't run fast. You have to run slowly." He had just made a pun with Liu, and now he heard another pun at the imperial city gate. The deputy commander of the palace guards was such a person, and what kind of attitude did he have? Ning Ke was shocked and waved his hands, saying, "Your Excellency, please don't say that. Although my waist and legs are good, they are not that thick." Su Chongshan pretended to be thin and unhappy. He said, "Although your waist is thin, your legs must be fat. Don't stand on ceremony." Ning Ke could not help but shiver when he heard the man's strong Hebei accent. He quickly changed the topic and asked in a low voice, "Your Excellency, isn't it too easy for our secret guards to be exposed? Eunuch Lin had pointed out my identity before I entered the palace today." Su Chongshan explained, "Eunuch Lin is His Majesty's man. Of course he knows the list of secret guards. Other than a few people in the palace, no one in the imperial court will know your identity, including Her Majesty." Ning Ke was relieved when he thought that His Majesty did not talk about the secret guards with him in front of Her Majesty. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked seriously, "Then, Her Highness?" Su Chongshan looked a little embarrassed. He said slowly, "Guessing is not necessarily knowing. Didn't you say this before?" "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Sit down." The Emperor waved his hand casually and gestured for Prince Li Peiyan to sit down. He put down the memorial in his hand and suddenly thought of something. He asked, "Did you drink the 2 barrels of double-steamed wine that I asked the palace to send to your mansion? Did you like it?" Li Peiyan frowned and said honestly, "The wine was too strong." The Emperor said angrily, "What's the point of drinking wine if it's not strong? You have been in poor health since you were a child. You have been spoiled by your mother. That's why you have such a weak body." Li Peiyan chuckled and said, "Anyway, I have my Majesty to protect me. It doesn't matter if I'm weak." After saying this, he became serious and stood up from the chair. He began to report to the Emperor, "The West Hill Diplomatic Corps is preparing to return. Longqing is also leaving Chang'an. Your Majesty, please issue an edict to keep this person in the capital city. The Emperor said casually. The agreement was to let that young man enter the second floor. Since he is incapable and can't enter, he can't blame me. But in this way the agreement is invalid. If he wants to leave, let him leave. Li Peiyan was a little shocked and said anxiously, My Majesty, he is a hostage of the Yan kingdom. How can we let him leave? The Tang Empire dominates the world by relying on its cavalry warriors and its unyielding spirit, not by relying on these hostages in Chang'an who hang out in brothels every day. The Emperor said mockingly, When the Yan Emperor sent the crown prince to Chang'an as a hostage, it was not to appease me, but to appease himself. If I don't accept his son, won't he have to worry every night that my cavalry will break into capital Chang'an and attack his bedchamber? In order to let that old guy sleep better and live a few more days, I have to reluctantly agree. You have to understand that it was the Yan Emperor, the South Jin Kingdom, and the others who cried and shouted to send the hostage to Chang'an. It was not me who wanted this hostage. Don't the Tang Empire need to spend money and waste food to feed them? The Emperor waved his hand and said, Let Prince Longqing go if he wants to. Chang'an doesn't feed useless people. Ning Ke got off the horse carriage at the entrance of Lin 47th Street and sneaked to the narrow alley behind the courtyard. He said a few secret signals through the wall and the back door of the old brush pen shop was pushed open. Ning Ke flashed in as fast as he could. Ning Ke took the hot towel to wash his face and put his feet in the basin of hot water that was at just the right temperature. He let out a comfortable moan and felt that the tiredness that had accumulated from yesterday to tonight had been swept away. His spirit that had been tense for a long time had finally relaxed. In one day and one night, he climbed the back of the mountain of the academy, defeated Prince Longqing, and obtained the qualification to enter the second floor. From a forgotten student of the academy, he became a genius fought over by the academy and the South School of Haotian Taoism. Then he was found to be the owner of the Blooming Flower Invitation, entered the palace, had dinner with His Majesty, and chatted with His Majesty's family. Shock after shock, wave after wave, came one after another. Such an experience was really hard to imagine, and it might be extremely difficult for anyone to replicate it in the future. It was too much for the bystanders to take in, not to mention him, the person involved. Ning Ke was still in a trance when he finally lay on the familiar bed, feeling that it was extremely unreal. Sang Sang added half a ladle of hot water to the basin under his feet, squatted on the ground, and looked up at him curiously. She asked, Young master, what does the Emperor look like? Is his beard long and white? The one with long and white hair is Santa Claus, not the Emperor. Ning Ke reclined on the quilt and pointed at his sore thigh with his finger, motioning Sang Sang to beat it a few times. He said, His Majesty is actually not that old. What kind of person is he? I really don't know. This was a very honest sentence. Ning Ke had always had a somewhat complicated feeling about the Emperor of the Tang Empire over the years. From the natural disaster to many details in the city of Wei's military stronghold, he could feel that the current emperor was a legendary wise monarch. However, every time he thought of the bloody case in the general's mansion and the murderers who were still sitting in the court, the word wise monarch would always be a question mark in his heart. After returning to Chang'an from the frontier fortress, he began to hunt down the murderers who participated in the bloody case in the general's mansion. It was also during this process that he found out that the emperor did not investigate the case openly, but did a lot of things secretly. Those who should be banished or demoted were demoted, and those who should be marginalized were marginalized. Ning Ke naturally thought that these punishments were far from enough, but he had to admit that the emperor had done enough for a long-forgotten case without any evidence to reverse the verdict or any necessity. As for the culprits of the bloody case in the general's mansion, Princely Pei Yen and General Xiahou. One was the emperor's younger brother, and the other was the cornerstone general of the empire. He could also understand the reason why they were still in the limelight. Ning Ke said silently in his heart, "Your Majesty, if you can't do it to your own younger brother, then leave it to me." Sang Sang sat by the bed and waved her small fists to rhythmically knock on his thighs. She looked at his face and could hardly suppress her curiosity. She asked, "Is the Empress beautiful? Her Highness doesn't seem to like her. But last time in the House of Red Sleeves, I heard from Xiao Chao that the Empress is the most beautiful woman in the world. That's why His Majesty only likes her for so many years." Feeling the small fists knocking on his thighs, Ning Ke comfortably squinted his eyes and said, "I think you should stay away from Xiao Chao. You can't learn anything from her. You can only learn to talk about the palace like a gossipy woman." Sang Sang said, "I'm just curious." Ning Ke suddenly thought of something and opened his eyes. He sighed and said, "I can't see anything special about the Empress, and it's hard for His Majesty to sum it up. But at least I know that if he were to do business, he would definitely be a good helper." The master and the handmaiden stared at the silver box on the bed. More precisely, they stared at the papers in the box. Their faces were full of heartache. After a long silence, Sang Sang raised her head and asked unwillingly, "Are we going to send all of them to the palace?" Ning Ke said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Of course not. At most 2/3, no, at most half." Sang Sang began to pick out the calligraphy sections from the box. Her movements were very slow and reluctant, and her face was full of heartache. Ning Ke was also very distressed. He sighed with regret and said, "If I had known that one day any piece of paper I casually wrote could be used as a banknote, how could I throw away so many and burn so many? Even if the writing is not good and the ink is smeared a little, it can still be used as half a banknote, right? In this way, how many banknotes do you think we have thrown away all these years?" Hearing this, Sang Sang's eyes suddenly brightened. She jumped off the bed abnormally quickly and violently pulled Ning Ke off the bed. She lifted the bedboard and reached in to search for a long time. Finally, she took out a small box. She took the box to the table and opened it. She took out the paper inside and said excitedly, "Young master, I have picked up many pieces of paper that you used to throw away. Can you exchange them for money?" Ning Ke was slightly startled. He subconsciously picked up the top piece of paper and glanced at it. He found that it was the funeral section that he had copied on the night of Joaer's death. He was shocked and asked, "I have already thrown this section away. When did you pick it up again?" Sang Sang smiled and said nothing. Ning Ke was shocked and speechless. After a long time, he came to his senses and reached out his hands to hold Sang Sang's slightly dark face. He said affectionately, "Sang Sang, how can I live without you?" At this moment, his stomach suddenly growled. Ning Ke took back his hands and rubbed his stomach. He glanced at the dark night outside the window and said, "It will be a long time before dawn, right?" "Yes, young master." Sang Sang asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Ning Ke said seriously, "At this time, I miss the hot and sour noodle slice soup very much." Sang Sang was puzzled and asked, "I heard that there are at least more than 100 dishes at the banquet in the palace. Are you not full, young master?" Ning Ke sneered and said, "What do those ignorant people think the palace is? The various delicacies at the imperial banquet are elegant and delicious, but they are exquisite. How can they be served like mountains and seas? I, young master, have also eaten the imperial banquet. In the future, don't say such things outside, lest people hear us and laugh at us for not having a broad vision." Sang Sang nodded and continued to ask calmly, "The imperial banquet must be good, but young master, are you full?" Ning Ke's face was slightly stiff. After a moment of silence, he said honestly, "Yes, I am not full." Sang Sang smiled and said, "I will go cook noodles." "You can't cook noodles for me. Can you give me some recommendation votes and monthly votes?" I said it was blocked today, but I still wrote 8,000 words. Recently, I have been so diligent and honest that even God is angry. Besides, I don't have the strength to revise it. Just rough it first, I will fix it tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 166. After getting up in the morning, Sang Sang combed Ning Kei's hair and fetched some hot water. Then she went out of the shop and bought 2 bowls of hot and sour noodle soup with 2 spoonfuls of minced beef. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, Ning Kei put on an unlined robe and began to have breakfast. Sang Sang took out clothes and shoes to match them. Last night, the Academy's spring clothes had been ironed tightly and the shoes and socks were all new. Ning Kei's serious and dignified handling of his clothes over the years could only be compared to last spring on the opening day of the Academy. With Sang Sang's help, Ning Kei began to put on his clothes. He held the brand new densely woven fine flower belt with both hands and pulled it hard. Sang Sang picked up a lot of tokens from the bedside and stuffed them into his belt. It took her a long time to stuff them all into his belt. Ning Kei took the quaint and small wooden token from her hand. His fingertips slowly stroked the smooth lines on it. He wondered why His Majesty gave him this waist token of the Imperial Center Administration last night, and it seemed to have existed for many years. The waist token should have been tied to the belt instead of being stuffed into the clothes. But Ning Kei had too many waist tokens in his hands. The waist token of the Secret Guard, the waist token of the Academy, the waist token of the second floor of the Academy, the waist token of a visiting minister given by the Fish Dragon Gang last year, and the new waist token of the Imperial Center Administration. If he hung all of them on his waist, he could totally go dancing. Ning Kei touched the bulging bulge on his waist and twisted it in front of Sang Sang. He said, "I've been in Chang and for a year and earned a lot of money and tokens. But your young master's waist is not thick enough. If there are more tokens in the future, I'm afraid I won't be able to hang them." Sang Sang looked up at him and said with a smile, "Young master, don't be so proud, okay?" Ning Kei said proudly, "I have to pretend to be quiet and gentle outside. Why can't I be proud at home?" Outside the front door of the old brush pen shop, the horse carriage had been quietly waiting in the alley under the morning light. But today, old Duan did not wait in the carriage, but stood outside the shop with a very respectful look. The coachman old Duan did not know about the second floor of the Academy, nor did he know about the flower blooming on the opposite shore heaven. But he was called over by the boss of the carriage and horse shop last night and was warned. His boss told him that he was lucky and that he must serve Ning Kei well in the future. Therefore, he took out the energy that he used to serve his wife at home and got up in the middle of the night. He changed into a set of clean clothes and brushed his teeth with a willow branch dipped in expensive powder for the first time. He also brushed the horse carriage clean and shiny and arrived at Lin 47th Street ahead of time to wait. Looking at the clean coachman and horse carriage, Ning Kei could not help but feel a little surprised. After asking a few questions, he guessed that the boss of the carriage and horse shop probably knew something. He could not help but smile and shake his head, thinking that it was hard not to be proud. The carriage gradually moved away from the eastern city and went out of the south gate of Chang, and via the Vermilion Bird Avenue. It went on the official road of the Empire and headed towards the fairyland-like academy in the distance. Ning Kei looked at the green trees and wildflowers along the road outside the window with a calm expression. He had seen the spring scenery on this road so many times that it could no longer arouse his thoughts. After looking at it for a while, he put down the curtain. Sitting in the slightly shaking carriage, he slowly closed his eyes. The fatigue and tension of the past few days had long left his body. But this was the first time that he had a chance to calmly recall the experience of these days. The morning light passed through the curtain and then through the eyelids, turning into a very dim light, which was very similar to the light intensity of the wilderness that was about to usher in the night. His thoughts instantly drifted back to those strange dreams and the strange illusions he saw during the process of climbing the mountain. After a long time, Ning Ke opened his eyes and shook his head. In the previous time, he once again reviewed the intertwining of light and darkness, the calling from the farthest place between heaven and earth and the deepest heart, and then found that these had nothing to do with him. If the last step was the test of the academy, why would the grand cultivator of the academy make such a mysterious illusion, and why would he be right? The selection test before climbing to the top of the back mountain of the academy was too metaphysical and too solemn. And Ning Ke was just a weak cultivator who had just entered the no-doubt state. Asking him to answer this question was like asking a philosophy professor of Heidelberg University to catch a child who had just entered elementary school. Who are you, where do you come from, and where do you want to go? The boy would not have held his head in his hands and pondered for half a century until he had turned into a statue and could not answer, but he would have answered in a loud voice. My name is Soenvich, I come from Frankfurt, and I am going fishing in the Neckar. Perhaps the philosophy professor of Heidelberg University also taught theology, or perhaps this professor was similar to the Zen masters in ancient China, who liked to play the trick of returning to the original and returning to the original. Hearing this answer, Ning Ke's thin body shook violently. He felt that the child's answer seemed simple, but in fact it was not simple. He found the ultimate path directly from the heart, and increasingly felt that the child was a rare genius. He was about to officially enter the second floor of the academy to study, but to be honest, until now he still did not know why the academy, why the long mountain road, and why the bigwigs who set up the illusion selection would choose him. After thinking for a long time, Ning Ke could only come to this conclusion. The headmaster of the academy is too profound, so he is confused, and I am that child. On the wide straight road in the southwest of Chang'an, several carriages and dozens of knights were silently moving forward. These carriages were mainly decorated in black and gold, exuding an indescribable sense of luxury and solemnity. Although the dozens of knights were not wearing armor, their neat black robes and determined expressions on their faces still exuded a sense of sacredness and inviolability. These knights were the world-renowned papal guardians of the West Hill Divine Kingdom, known as the world's most elite cavalry. The carriages that were qualified to be protected by them were undoubtedly bigwigs from the Divine Hall. It was still early at this time, but the carriages appeared on the road south of Chang'an, indicating that they had left Chang'an as soon as the city gate opened. If the team consisting of bigwigs from the Divine Hall and papal guardians were walking in other countries, it would definitely attract countless onlookers and cheers, and there might even be many believers kowtowing on the road. But now they were in the territory of the Tang Empire, and it was still early. No one on either side of the road looked at them, and no one offered pious tears. The team just moved forward silently and quickly, giving people a feeling that they wanted to leave as soon as possible at all costs. Prince Long Qing sat in the middle of the luxurious yet solemn black and gold horse carriage. His calm eyes looked through the window at the Tang people's houses and the fields of rape flowers that looked like golden blanket. He listened to the sound of the horses' hooves and the knight's breathing. He felt the oppressive atmosphere and the strange silence. Suddenly, he smiled and said, "When you came, the whole Chang'an city was in jubilation. The believers, women and children lined the road to welcome you, and fruits and flowers were thrown at the carriages. But when you leave, you are so silent and even deliberately choose to leave when the city gate is open. Don't you think you are like a stray dog?" Sitting opposite him, Priest Moli, the deputy head of the Revelation Institute, slightly changed his expression. He did not understand why Prince Long Qing would say such a thing. He forcibly suppressed his anger and said, "Why do you humiliate yourself like this?" Prince Long Qing showed a faint expression of ridicule and said, "No matter where the papal guardians are in the world, They wear golden armor and shine like gods. But when you enter the territory of the Tang people, you have to take off your armor and hand over your spear. Otherwise, you are not allowed to enter. This is a real humiliation." Before Molly said anything, he continued with a smile, "Deputy Head, do you know why I live in the Peach Alley in Chang'an City?" Priest Molly was slightly shocked. He did not know whether Prince Long Qing was trying to test him. But looking at his smiling face, he did not know why his heart became colder and colder. After a moment of hesitation, he honestly answered, "Because the prince's natal item is the peach blossom." "Yes, then do you know why I chose the peach blossom as my natal item?" Prince Long Qing asked. Priest Molly shook his head. People in the West Hill Divine Palace did not know the real reason. Because when the headmaster of the academy entered the West Hill, he drank wine and cut down all the peach blossoms on the Divine Mountain. But no one dared to stop him. Prince Long Qing looked out the window at the beautiful rape fields and said calmly, "This is the biggest humiliation that the West Hill Divine Palace has suffered in the past 100 years. I chose the peach blossom as my natal item to remind myself not to forget this humiliation." He continued indifferently, "This time, I lowered myself to accept the test of the second floor of the academy because I want to have the opportunity to learn from the headmaster of the academy. I hope that I can avenge this humiliation on behalf of the Divine Hall in the future. But I did not expect that I would be humiliated by Ning Ke again." Priest Molly wanted to comfort him, but found that he could not find any suitable words. "You just said that I was humiliating myself. In fact, you are wrong. Humiliation has nothing to do with who initiated it. It only matters about strength. If I am stronger than others, then those words are ridicule. If I am weaker than others, then those words are self-humiliation. The Tangs can disarm my apologetic divine army. The headmaster of the academy can cut down all the peach blossoms on the mountain, and Ning Ke can force me to flee Chang unlike a dog. It is not because they want to humiliate me, but because they are stronger in some aspects. But I am very grateful for this humiliation. Let me tell you a piece of good news. Maybe I have already taken that step. Now I only hope that Ning Ke can really become strong quickly, so that I can have the opportunity to avenge this humiliation." Hearing this, Priest Molly was shocked and then ecstatic. He thought that if Prince Long Qing could enter the knowing destiny state during the journey, then the Divine Hall might forgive him for the humiliation he brought to the Divine Hall. After repeatedly congratulating him, he had secretly made up his mind to hold on to the prince's thigh more tightly in the future. Suddenly he thought of something and asked in a low voice, "Crown Prince Chongming has returned to the Yen Kingdom. The good news that the prince has entered the knowing destiny state, should we send someone to inform the Emperor of Yen as soon as possible?" Prince Long Qing slightly laughed at himself and said, "What's the point of letting my father know about this? Fighting for the throne? Is the throne of the Yen Kingdom more attractive than the Haotian Great Way?" Priest Molly sincerely suggested, "But the throne should originally belong to you, Prince. It is mine, and it will always be mine." Prince Long Qing recalled the illusions he had seen on the back of the mountain of the academy, especially the great light and great fear he had seen in the last few steps on the edge of the cliff. His face was slightly pale, and then he resolutely said, "Anyone who wants to take away my things will die." He withdrew his hand from the window, and did not know when there was a pink peach blossom between his fingers. He casually inserted the peach blossom on his lapel, wondering if there was a transparent hole under the petals that were full of vitality. Prince Long Qing looked at the smoke from the houses outside the window and the rape flowers in the field. After a long silence, he calmly smiled and said, "In a few years, I will pull down all these ugly Tang's houses and eradicate all the rape flowers in the fields. Then I will burn them all. I will burn away the evil and filth, and burn away a holy and bright world." The horse carriage stopped by the meadow outside the academy as usual. Ning Ke got off the carriage and found that the atmosphere in the academy today was very different from before. There were still many students standing in the distance, looking at him and discussing. However, the disdain and disgust in their eyes had long been replaced by shock, envy, and a touch of regret. Under these gazes, Ning Ke walked into the academy and nodded slightly to Chang Jingming, who was beside the stone steps. Then he saw a little attendant standing in the morning light and waving to him. He could not help but be slightly startled. The little attendant had delicate features, and his little face was very tender, as if it was made of pink and jade. He looked at Ning Ke walking toward him, and then he very respectfully bowed and said, "Young master, I am the attendant of my young master. I have been ordered to bring you up the mountain." The little attendant had to put on the airs of an old master. Ning Ke could not help but laugh and asked, "The question is, who is your young master? And why do you call me young master?" The little attendant chuckled and touched his head. He explained, "My young master is the second son, and the way I address him is the rule set by my young master. You are the youngest one in the back mountain, so I have to call you young master." Ning Ke asked with great interest, "Then, which Mr. Chen Pippi is?" The little attendant answered in a childish voice, "He used to be young master. Now that you are young master, he is Mr. 12. Ning Ke was startled, and then he shook his head and said with a smile, "That fat man and young master, it sounds a little strange." The little attendant said seriously, "Actually, I think so too." The path that Ning Ke took to enter the back mountain of the academy today was certainly not the one that had tormented him half to death. The little attendant took him to a secluded alley and went up from a stone path beside the old library. Then they stopped in front of the thick fog that covered the mountain. "Young master, there is also a path on the second floor of the old library. But young master said that today is your first day here, so please go this way." Ning Ke looked at the fog in front of him and subconsciously thought of the fog on the long mountain path the day before yesterday. His body slightly stiffened. After a moment of silence, he looked at the little attendant and asked gently, "Is there anything strange in the fog?" The little attendant laughed and said, "Of course not. I often walk." There was indeed nothing strange in this mountain fog, such as the bamboo leaves that turned into flying swords, the mountain springs that turned into waterfalls, and the small ponds that turned into seas. This mountain fog was very strange. Ning Ke walked only a dozen steps and actually walked to the mountainside of the academy's back mountain. He waved his sleeves and brushed away the last few wisps of fog in front of him. He could not help but be stunned by the mountainside scenery in front of him, which was like a fairyland under the morning light. Looking from the direction of the academy, there was actually such a large flat cliff facing the east side of the steep mountain. On the cliff plateau, there was a mirror-like lake, blooming wildflowers, tranquil grass, and towering ancient trees. There were thousands of kinds of flowers, including peach blossoms, but they were inconspicuous among them. Under the towering ancient trees, there were more than 10 simple houses, with smoke curling up from the chimneys. Behind the houses, there was a silver line pouring down from the cliff. It was actually a waterfall in the far distance. A flock of black birds were chirping and flying between the cliff and the waterfall. In the morning light, such a beautiful scene came into his eyes. Ning Ke was stunned and did not know what to say. Feeling the quiet chi of heaven and earth and the smell of life in the back mountain, a strong thought came into his mind. No matter who wants to destroy such beauty, I will definitely destroy you first. Modified 201121104008. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 167. When I came here for the first time, I was shocked by the beauty of this place, just like you. Chen Pippi stood beside Ning Ke without anyone noticing. Ning Ke turned to look at him and asked, Is it more beautiful than the place where you used to live? Chen Pippi looked at him and wondered if he had guessed his origin. After a moment of silence, he said, solemn, or sacred, in fact, they are not beautiful. He smiled and continued, welcome to the real academy. Ningke replied with a smile, it seems that you are my tour guide today. Chen Pippi had never heard of the word tour guide, but he could guess what it meant. He smiled and led him to the cliff platform. They walked through the green fields and meadows, stepped on the slightly wet ridges, and walked on a wooden bridge. Then they came to the lake as calm as a mirror. The white water birds in the lake sometimes floated and sometimes sank, hunting for small fish in the water. Whether they succeeded or failed, they proudly raised their heads, swallowed the fish, or shook off the water drops on their feathers. The footsteps on the wooden bridge attracted the attention of the water birds, but they were obviously not afraid of people. Instead, they seemed to be curious and very intelligent. There was a pavilion in the middle of the wooden bridge, and it was very quiet among the lake and water. A woman in a light yellow spring dress of the academy was concentrating on embroidery in the pavilion. Chen Pippi led Ningke to the woman and bowed respectfully, seventh sister. The woman in light yellow raised her head and glanced at Ningke beside him. She said with a smile, show youngest brother around. Ningke bowed with hands folded in front and said respectfully, seventh sister. Seventh sister glanced at Chen Pippi with a faint smile and suddenly said, from now on, you can be lazy. Chen Pippi smiled awkwardly. Ningke did not understand and looked at the two blankly. Seventh sister did not say anything and continued to embroider. After walking out of the pavilion and crossing the lake to the shore along the wooden bridge, Chen Pippi looked back and introduced to Ningke, seventh sister is Muyu, an expert in tactical arrays. The fog you passed through when you went up the mountain was set up by the predecessors of the academy. Now she is responsible for the maintenance of the tactical array. As for embroidery, seventh sister encountered a bottleneck 2 years ago, and neither eldest brother nor second brother could find a good way. Finally, the headmaster decided to let her embroider. She has been embroidering for 2 years, and I don't know if she has passed the bottleneck. Ningke was still shocked in his heart, but he kept calm on the surface. This was the first time he entered the second floor of the academy, and he had no idea about many things. For example, what was the relationship between embroidery and tactical arrays? But because he had no idea at all, he knew that even if he asked, it would be useless, so he remained silent. Chen Pippi led him past the extremely tall ancient tree and walked to the dense forest in the west. Listening to the melodious sound of zither and flute, he said, the one who plays the flute is 9th brother Baigong Weiyang, and the one who plays the zither is 10th brother Shimen Buhua. They come from the southernmost island and are proficient in temperament. As for what method they are cultivating, I'm afraid that even they themselves don't know. Ningke asked in surprise, what do you mean? How can a cultivator not know his own method of cultivation? Chen Pippi shook his head and explained, the headmaster never assigns them homework, but just lets them play these useless things freely. I have been listening to them play for many years in the academy, and I have never seen them do anything else. The sound of zither and flute in the spring forest suddenly stopped, and then there was a rustling sound. 2 men walked out of the forest. The 2 men were handsome and calm, wearing the white academy spring clothes, which had obviously been modified. The sleeves and hem of the robe were very wide, and when the spring wind blew, they looked like immortals. They did not look like students, but more like sage-like hermits. 9th brother, who was holding the flute, looked at Chen Pippi and said angrily, what do you mean by even I myself don't know? Chen Pippi said with a smile, then tell me, what on earth have you been cultivating in the academy for so many years? 9th brother picked up the flute and hit Chen Pippi's head hard without hesitation. Chen Pippi covered his head and shouted angrily, 9th brother, how can you hit me when you can't win an argument? What happened to your elegant demeanor? The man who had been silent beside holding the zither suddenly said, "Good hit." Chin Pippi looked at the man and said, "10th brother, you have never been such a person." 10th brother Shimin Buhua smiled and gently held the zither in his hands in front of him. His fingertips slightly trembled and plucked out a broken sound. He looked at Ning Kai and said, "Youngest brother, senior brother Baigong and I are cultivating the great way of music. A layman like Pippi who only knows how to fight with the chi of heaven and earth can never understand the beauty of music. I hope you are not such a layman." 9th brother Baigong Weiyang put the flute in his waist and looked at Ning Kai with great interest and said, "Youngest brother, when I saw you climbing the mountain that day, you were quite free and easy. Master Yen Sei also said that you have the potential of a divine talisman master, and I heard that you are a famous calligrapher in Chang'an recently. In this case you must have some attainments in art. You and I should have a good competition in the future." Ning Kai hurriedly bowed respectfully, but he thought bitterly in his heart that he did not know anything about music. As for whether it was vulgar or not, being able to perceive the chi of heaven and earth should of course be used to improve one's state and then learn fighting skills. These two senior brothers actually put all their cultivation and lives into music. It was elegant, but it was a waste of God's gift. "Senior brothers, I don't know anything about the way of music," he hurriedly replied. 9th brother Baigong Weiyang did not take it seriously. He waved his sleeves and said, "Music and calligraphy are beautiful things in heaven and earth. The word art stresses on understanding by analogy. You didn't have a chance in the past, but now you have met me and your 10th brother. How can you know nothing about it?" Seeing their enthusiasm, Ning Kai was too embarrassed to refuse. So he promised that in the future, when he was free from studying in the academy, he would respectfully ask these two senior brothers for advice on the way of music. Even if he could not learn anything, it would be good to be an audience. Hearing this, the two senior brothers showed joy on their faces and praised together, "You are indeed not a layman like Pippi." On the way to the house on the cliff plateau under the big tree, Chin Pippi glanced at Ning Kai and asked seriously, "Do you really like to listen to the sound of flute and zither?" Ning Kai glanced at him and said, "Not at all. You don't have to look at me like this. This is my first day in the 2nd floor of the academy. How can I refuse two senior brothers who are so enthusiastic?" Chin Pippi said bitterly, "You idiot, of course you should firmly refuse this kind of thing." Ning Kai did not understand and asked, "If senior brothers want to play flute for me in the future, I can just avoid it. What's the problem?" These years, no senior brother or senior sister is willing to quietly listen to their performance. They can only face each other and play flute and zither every day. One is happy, the other is sad. They flatter each other and are already bored to the extreme. What they lack is an audience. Since you have promised them, you can wait to be dragged to the back mountain every day to be an audience. Ning Kai asked confusedly, "Are you two senior brothers very poor in the way of music? If you two senior brothers were in the world, you would definitely be the first-class rhythmic masters," Chen Pippi said with a straight face. Soon after, his eyebrows drooped down bitterly as he continued, "But no matter how amazing a musician is, if you listen to the same song over and over again for 1,000 times, you will know the pain within." Would he get tired of eating 1,000 bowls of hot and sour noodle slices? Would Sang Sang get tired of eating 1,000 bowls of cabbage heads in vinegar? Would he get tired of taking Sang Sang to the building of pines and cranes to eat 1,000 bowls of noodles in a row? Of course he would get tired of listening to the same song for 1,000 times in a row, and it would be very painful. Ning Kai asked with a trembling voice, "There are countless people in the world who love Rhythmic Master. I think you two senior brothers won't let me listen to it alone. There are many people in the world who love Rhythmic Master, but in your opinion, there are very few people who are qualified to listen to their music. Those who can enter the back mountain of the academy and become their classmates have all passed the test of the headmaster of the academy. Of course they are qualified, but others are not. After a long silence, Ning-Ke said resolutely, I will avoid it. I used to avoid it. Chun Pippi looked at him sympathetically and sighed. The back mountain of the academy is not small, but it is still possible to find someone. When Ning-Ke was about to say something, he suddenly found that the flowering tree beside the stone path was shaking. A person whose face could not be seen clearly suddenly rushed out, which startled him. When he looked closely, he found that it was a young senior brother whom he met on the top of the mountain that day. But today, this senior brother's hair and clothes were all covered with all kinds of flower petals, which looked very funny and a little scary. Chun Pippi pulled him to his side and introduced him very seriously. This is 11th brother, Wang Qi. Ning-Ke hurriedly tidied up his clothes and bowed deeply. Greetings, 11th brother. 11th brother stared at him and did not return the bow. Instead, he picked up a petal on his shoulder and asked blankly, Let me ask you, if there is nothing outside your heart and nothing outside your heart, but before the headmaster of the academy entered the back mountain, this flower has bloomed and withered in the mountain for thousands of years. What does it have to do with our hearts? If no one enters the back mountain, if no one sees this flower does not exist? Ning-Ke was speechless. After a long silence, he turned his head and looked at Chun Pippi innocently. Chun Pippi's gaze was even more innocent than his, which meant that if Ning-Ke could not answer clearly, it would not be good for him to leave. 11th brother Wang Qi looked at him tenderly and waited for a long time without an answer. But he did not show any displeasure on his face. He explained himself gently. In my opinion, before you and I see this flower, the flower and our hearts are silent. When you and I come to see this flower, the flower appears and blooms in our hearts. Whether this flower exists or not depends on the moment when it appears. Ning-Ke slightly opened his mouth, still speechless, and looked very innocent. Chun Pippi felt a little guilty because of this guy's innocent look. He coughed twice and said, 11th brother, it is the first day that youngest brother entered the back mountain. I have to take him to meet other senior brothers. Can we talk about the flower's heart later? Wang Qi looked at Ning-Ke warmly and said, Youngest brother, if you have spare time in the future, can you help me to think about it? Ning-Ke heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly agreed. Then he followed Chun Pippi and ran away from the flowering trees towards the houses under the ancient trees on the cliff plateau. He did not notice the sympathetic look on Chun Pippi's face. I haven't recovered yet. I feel like vomiting while writing. It seems that I lack pressure. Well, I can put more pressure on myself. I will guarantee 6,000 words tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 168. There was a stove in the house and a water wheel outside. The house was filled with white steam both inside and outside. Ning-Ke and Chun Pippi stood obediently outside the threshold and watched the naked strong man playing with the fire and iron as if he was treating his beloved lover. After a long time, the noise in the room finally stopped. The strong man took off his leather apron and wiped the sweat on his face with a towel. He walked to the door and said with a simple and honest smile, I'm your sixth senior brother. Chun Pippi said to Ning-Ke with a smile, The armors and weapons made by sixth brother are unparalleled in the world. The armor that General Su Shi is wearing now was made by sixth brother. If you need it in the future, you can directly ask senior brother for it. Senior brother is the most amiable and kind person. Although he doesn't like to talk much, he will definitely do what he promised you. During that period of time, Ning-Ke had been staring at sixth brother hammering and smithing. He vaguely felt something very interesting from sixth brother's extremely rhythmic and powerful movement. Now listening to Chun Pippi's introduction and thinking of the 3 knives and arrows hidden in Lin 47th Street, His eyes suddenly brightened and he exclaimed, "Sixth brother is a talisman Taoism master? If you want to classify the methods, I should be considered as a martial arts cultivator. But I don't have time to learn how to fight in this life. I only know how to hammering." Sixth brother answered honestly, "Youngest brother, I know what you want to ask. The armors and weapons I made do have talisman inscriptions, but that has nothing to do with me. It's fourth brother's work." "Fourth brother?" Ning Ke asked in surprise. Sixth brother looked at the dark corner of the house and said with a smile, "That's him." Ning Ke then noticed that there was a very small sand table in the dark corner, and a man in a Cyan Academy spring suit was sitting beside it. The temperature in the house was extremely high, but the man didn't have a drop of sweat on his body. He didn't even feel hot. He just focused on the small sand table in front of him. He was like a part of the house which could easily escape the eyes. If you closed your eyes, you couldn't even feel that he was sitting there. Fourth senior brother has been cultivating the turbid light talisman recently. Chern Pippi explained to him. He wants to make the runes and the steel that make up the weapon even more closely until they become one. Fourth brother, who was sitting in the dark corner, raised his head and ignored Ning Ke and Chen Pippi. He directly said to the naked strong man, "It's not a problem to use the 3 stars pattern to increase the frontal impact resistance, but what about the tearing force on the side? If a martial artist spreads the heaven-earth yuan qi on the surface of their skin, it will be difficult to activate the runes on the armor." Sixth brother walked over there, followed by Ning Ke and Chen Pippi. There were 3 seemingly simple lines drawn on the sand table. These lines were not completely straight. A few extremely smooth semicircular arcs were drawn where the lines intersected. It looked like a line holding a few drops of water that were about to fuse but had yet to completely fuse. Listening to the discussion of the 2 senior brothers, Ning Ke knew that they wanted to modify the runes on the armor to improve the defense ability. This was the first time that he saw the application of talisman Taoism in reality, so he couldn't help but feel curious. "I don't know talisman Taoism, nor do I know what these patterns are for. But I always feel that these semicircles are too smooth or too perfect." Sixth brother scratched his head and said honestly, "I just feel that things that are too perfect can't be beaten." After a long silence, fourth brother said, "You have been forging iron all your life, so you are more familiar with the power than me. Although I don't know how it works, I believe in your intuition. These semicircles are really too perfect." Ning Ke felt a little nervous and stared at the sand table paved with fine white sand. He wanted to see what kind of changes fourth brother was going to make. No one drew a picture with a wooden brush. The fine white sand on the sand table magically and quickly rolled. The lines on the sand table seemed to be pulled by an invisible hand and changed shape. No one knew how many combinations had been made in a moment. Ning Ke stared at the lines on the sand table. His eyes flashed quickly along with the changes of those lines. His thinking gradually couldn't keep up with those extremely complicated combinations. He only felt a slight pain in his mind and a wave of annoyance in his chest and abdomen. Walking out of the house to the water wheel, Ning Ke held a handful of cold water to wash his face. Only then did he feel a little better. He looked at Chern Pippi with lingering fear and said, "I really didn't expect that these fragments of talisman Taoism are so difficult to understand. It's because they are fragments that it is easy to cause mental fluctuations. Not to mention that you overestimated yourself and wanted to see so many changes clearly." Chern Pippi filled a bamboo tube with water and drank it all. He wiped his mouth and said mockingly, "Not to mention that the furnace in sixth brother's house never goes out all year round. It is used to refine various kinds of steel materials. He doesn't know how to fight, but his martial arts cultivation is extremely profound. That's why he is fine staying in there. How can a guy like you not faint from the heat?" Ning Ke was mocked by him, but he didn't feel offended. He thought of these senior brothers and sisters that he saw in the back of the mountain of the academy today. These seemingly crazy but obviously very magical scenes made him very excited. Fifth brother and eighth brother went to play chess. Before they entered the mountain, one was a chess player from the South Jin Kingdom, and the other was a chess master from the Ueluan Kingdom. They had fought more than 10 times and could not decide the winner. After they entered the mountain, they became senior brothers, but they didn't forget about the past. As long as they were free, they would hold the chess pieces and sit under the pine tree on the mountain for several days. Chin Pippi thought of the 2 senior brothers and said angrily, "They often forget to eat because of playing chess. How could they remember that today is the day you entered the academy? If I hadn't searched all over the mountain to bring them meals, I really wonder if they would vomit blood on the chess pieces and then die of hunger and cold, becoming 2 elegant ghosts under the pine tree." Ning Ke was speechless when he heard this. He thought that the back of the mountain of the academy was really full of strange people. He didn't know why the headmaster of the academy accepted these people as students. "Third sister, you are familiar with her," Chin Pippi continued. "She should still be copying the small regular script in the old library. You can see her whenever you want. Don't ask me why she is copying the small regular script by the east window every day. I only know that it is the homework that the teacher gave her." Recalling the number of people he saw at the top of the cliff that night, Ning Ke silently calculated and said to Chin Pippi, "Eldest brother has followed the headmaster of the academy to travel in the kingdom of Qi, so there should be 2 senior brothers that he hasn't met yet. You haven't met second brother yet. As for the other one, it's not senior brother. That old man's seniority is a bit strange. He only reads books every day and doesn't talk to anyone. Senior brothers and senior sisters don't like to talk to him." Chin Pippi led him to the waterfall behind the cliff plateau and warned him, "I'm going to take you to second brother now. You have to pay attention to your manners. Although the Shixiang and Shiji that I met earlier behaved strangely, they are all very kind people. Second Shixiang is serious and upright, and always asks others to correct him. If you make any mistakes, be careful of being beaten." Ning Ke was shocked and asked nervously, "Then how should I face second brother?" Chin Pippi looked back at him and said mockingly, "You have always been good at putting on airs. Just like how you faced senior brothers and senior sisters just now. I really didn't expect that you, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, would be so good at showing off." Ning Ke said sarcastically, "A wise man submits to circumstances, and an idiot who doesn't." Chin Pippi looked at him and sighed, saying, "In addition to being serious and upright, second brother's biggest characteristic is his pride, and he can't bear to see others behave more arrogantly than him in front of him. So, I'm sorry for your loss. Judging from your usual arrogant attitude, I think second brother must have taught you a lot these years." Ning Ke looked at his chubby face and said mockingly, "As for me, you don't have to worry about me. In front of second brother, I will definitely be the most modest person in the world." "It's too late." Chin Pippi looked at him with a faint smile and said, "The math problem you gave me last year finally caused second brother to close himself for half a month. Do you think someone as proud as him will forget it?" It turned out that Chin Pippi's threat was just a paper tiger. After walking to the small courtyard not far from the silver waterfall and finally seeing the legendary second brother, Ning Ke found that second brother was definitely not a supercilious person. He even felt that second brother's tone was very gentle and kind, without any trace of arrogance and conceit. Standing on the stone steps, second brother looked at them calmly and asked indifferently, "Ning Ke, youngest brother?" "Sorry, I shouldn't call him youngest brother now. 12th took you to walk around the back mountain. How do you feel?" Senior brothers and senior sisters are concentrating on cultivation, which is really my. Ning Ke replied respectfully. However, before he finished his words, second brother raised his hand to stop him and said coldly, Those guys only know how to play with birds, feed fish, play the zither, and play chess every day. How can they be concentrating on cultivation? Fourth brother obviously has great potential in talisman Taoism, but I don't know what's wrong with his brain. He was actually tricked by sixth brother to be a worker in the blacksmith's shop. Teacher is too kind to care about them. Otherwise, I would have taught them a good lesson. It's really unwise for you to say that they are your role models. Ning Ke didn't know how to answer this. Second brother suddenly asked in a low voice, "What are you looking at?" When he saw the waterfall just now, Ning Ke had set the tone for this conversation and made a lot of psychological preparations. He decided to pretend to be a shy quail in front of second brother and never raise his head to look directly into his eyes rudely during the conversation. However, the ancient crown on second brother's head, which looked like a laundry stick, was really too eye-catching. As for the ancient crown on second brother's head, it was hard for anyone to move their eyes away once they saw it. Ning Ke always felt like he was talking to a wooden club. It was such a weird feeling that even he found it hard to keep a calm expression on his face. Compared with the high ancient crown that looked like a wooden stick, second brother's appearance was much more normal, but also had its own characteristics. Second senior brother had straight eyebrows, a straight nose, and thin lip. He was not handsome, but there was nothing wrong with him. His black hair was neatly combed and hung behind him without a single strand out of place. It did not lean to the left or to the right. As for his two eyebrows, they were exactly the same, even giving people the feeling that the number of eyebrows on both sides was exactly the same. His calm and spirited eyes were the same, and there was no fault to be found. His entire person gave people a helpless feeling that they couldn't praise or find fault with. This feeling of helplessness was probably shared by everyone who saw second brother. It was because of this feeling that Ning Ke's mind drifted slightly. When he suddenly heard this question, he couldn't help but be shocked and said with a smile, "Senior brother, I'm looking at your crown." Second brother looked at him quietly and asked, "Why do you want to see?" Ning Ke's expression was very natural, and he answered naturally, "Because it looks good." Second brother was slightly startled. Chen Pippi, who had been playing the role of a quail, became stiff and silently cursed in his heart. He thought that after knowing this guy for a year, he still didn't fully understand how shameless and despicable he was. No matter how natural flattery was, sometimes it would make the recipient feel a little embarrassed, and embarrassed easily. What's more, the person he was facing today was second brother of the academy. At this important moment, Ning Ke would never give him any chance to reflect and wake up. He randomly chose something in his mind and asked confusedly, "Second brother, when I was on the way back from the grassland to the capital with Princess Li Yu last year, I once met a great sword master in see-through state at the entrance of the northern mountain road of Min Mountain. Some people said that he was an abandoned disciple of the second floor of the academy. It's not that easy to enter the back mountain of the academy. Since you've come in, how can you easily go out?" Second brother said, "The rich have distant relatives deep in the mountain. There are many stupid people in the world who always want to have some relationship with the academy to protect their identity. Every year, there are many abandoned disciples of the second floor. Should the academy announce to the world that there is no such person every time they appear? I'm worried that these arrogant people will ruin the reputation of the academy." What Ning Ke said was his true thought. Second brother said sarcastically, "Those who know will naturally know. As for those who are not qualified to know, no matter what thoughts they have, they are not qualified to affect the reputation of the academy. It seems that you don't need to pay attention to such things in the future." Hearing this, Ning Ke sighed in his heart and thought that he finally felt second brother's pride. It was indeed a very fierce pride. Second brother noticed the meaning in his eyes and thought that this new youngest brother was shocked by what he had seen and heard today, and was a little confused. He calmly comforted him, The back mountain of the academy, or the second floor, is actually not as mysterious as people say. This is the place where the headmaster teaches students. It's as simple as that. Do you feel helpless? Yes. Don't you think that second senior brother is really boring? He does everything by the book, right? Yes. Do you feel that his hat looks like a wooden stick? After looking at it for a long time, sometimes you suddenly feel that the hat looks like a folded paper toy. No matter what it looks like, do you have the urge to break it or squash it? After leaving the small courtyard, they could no longer hear the sound of the waterfall falling from the cliff into the pool. After confirming that second brother would not eavesdrop on their conversation, the two youngest guys in the back mountain of the academy began to talk. Chen Pippi rubbed his cheeks, which were a little numb because of his previous serious expression. He looked at Ning Kei and asked, "Say it." After a moment of silence, Ning Kei honestly replied, "I do have this kind of feeling." Chen Pippi looked at him seriously and said, "Not only you, but all of us do. Sixth brother has even tried several times." Ning Kei slightly opened his mouth and looked at the fat lad's face. He hesitated and said, "I don't know how to continue." Chen Pippi shook his head and said, "I'm not stupid enough to trick you to smash second brother's hat. In fact, after seeing your performance today, I firmly believe that it is very likely that you will think of some sinister tricks to trick me to do this happy thing in the future." Ning Kei smiled and suddenly said, "I think it's good for second brother to be proud. At least this is more like a person. I won't take your words as evidence to blackmail you." Chen Pippi's expression and words were obviously different. He patted Ning Kei's shoulder sympathetically and said, "In fact, we all feel the same about this, especially after second brother raised a goose 2 years ago." Ning Kei asked in surprise, "A goose?" Chen Pippi said with a smile, "We always thought that the reason why second brother raised the goose was that the goose was very proud. He felt that he had finally found his own kind. In this case, of course, he should raise it well." Ning Kei was startled and shook his head repeatedly with a smile. He said, "Too mean, too vicious." Chen Pippi said with a smile, "Don't doubt it. You will know why we said that when you see the goose later." As they spoke, they came to a gentle slope where wildflowers were in full bloom on the green meadow. The two of them chose a clean spot among the flowers and sat down. Below the slope was a gently flowing stream, which seemed to be coming from the waterfall on the cliff. It seemed that after flowing out of the cliff, it would form a new waterfall, but they didn't know where it would fall. The spring wind and the warm sun mixed together and gently blew on the faces of the two young people. They lay among the wildflowers on the meadow with their hands behind their heads and opened their eyes to look at the beautiful scenery, looking extremely comfortable. Ning Kei looked at the stream at the bottom of the slope and said, "In the academy below, I would occasionally look up at the mountains, but I have never seen a waterfall. I have never thought that the depths of the mountains in the fog could be so beautiful." Chen Pippi squinted and looked at the black spots in the sky. He said with a smile, "This mountain is very big, and there are many places that I haven't been to. I heard from fourth brother that the side of the mountain facing Chang'an City is a precipice. The waterfall that you are concerned about might fall from there. I once went there to take a peek. The bottom of the precipice is full of clouds and mist. I don't know what's down there. Take me there if there is a chance." Okay. Ning Kei had excellent eyesight. He looked at the fish swimming under the stream and thought of the senior brothers and sisters he saw in the back mountain today. He asked curiously, "Senior brothers and sisters, what state are they in now?" "Second brother has long been in the knowing destiny state, but I don't know whether he is in the upper or middle knowing destiny state, and whether he has seen that door. Third sister to 11th brother, they are all in the see-through state and the upper, middle or lower states." This answer was really out of Ning Kei's expectation. He looked at Chen Pippi in surprise and said, "You are all in the knowing destiny state. Why are senior brothers and sisters still in the see-through state?" Churn Pippi glanced at him and said sarcastically, "There is a time to learn Taoism, but there is no time to enter Taoism. Although I am the latest to enter the knowing destiny state, it is not a big deal. The so-called state division is just a fighting method. No one in the back of the mountain really cares about it. If we really fight, starting from third sister, all the way to 11th brother, they can't beat me. Don't forget that I am a peerless cultivation genius." "How did senior brothers and sisters enter the academy?" "Of course they were recruited by the headmaster." Churn Pippi did not notice that he had been influenced too much by second brother these years, and started to talk nonsense out of habit. Ning Ke said helplessly, "I am asking a serious question. Could it be that my answer is not serious?" Churn Pippi looked at him gloomily and said, "Who can draw straighter lines than fourth brother? Who was better at embroidery than seventh sister? Who was more exquisite than Chen Fa? Who can play zither and flute better than ninth brother and 10th brother? Who can forge iron better than sixth brother? As for the two crazy chess players, you can't find a third person in the world who can beat them on the chessboard. Our senior brothers and sisters are all the top figures in the world in a certain aspect. Again, they may not be able to beat others in a fight, but in other aspects you and I can't even catch up with them." Ning Ke said seriously, "That is not necessarily true. When it comes to calligraphy, I still have some confidence." Churn Pippi laughed heartily. Ning Ke also laughed. Suddenly he thought of something and asked confusedly, since senior brothers and sisters were already the top figures in a certain aspect before entering the mountain, why did the headmaster summon them to the academy? They are already invincible in the world, and they will still be invincible if they continue to cultivate. Who can make them go further in their field? Churn Pippi looked at him and said seriously, "I said before that no one can beat senior brothers and sisters in their field, but this sentence actually has a premise. We must exclude the existence of one person." "Who?" "Eldest brother." Ning Ke was silent for a long time before he gradually digested the shock in his heart. He stared at his eyes and said, "You mean, eldest brother knows everything and is the strongest person in any field?" Churn Pippi sighed slowly and said, "I only know that eldest brother has always been responsible for teaching and solving doubts in the back of the mountain of the academy." Ning Ke was stunned and speechless. After a long time, he murmured, "How can there be such an all-rounder in the world?" Churn Pippi looked up at the birds in the blue sky and said with a smile, "Do you feel very depressed? You are very proud, I am very proud, and second brother is even more proud. But even second brother is not qualified to be proud in front of eldest brother. The most interesting thing is that if you see eldest brother, you will find that he does not know what is pride at all." Ning Ke looked at the sky absent-mindedly and said after a long silence, "It turns out that in the world, besides, there are really people who are born with knowledge." Churn Pippi did not notice the pause between his words and said, "There is no one in the world who is born with knowledge." Ning Ke said sarcastically, "If not born with knowledge, who can teach a person like eldest brother?" Churn Pippi said sarcastically, "Idiot, eldest brother is the teacher's student. Of course, he was taught by the teacher." Ning Ke was speechless and suddenly thought of one thing. Eldest brother's teacher was also his teacher. At this time, he realized that he had become the student of the legendary headmaster of academy. He could not help but feel excited and uneasy. He suddenly turned his head and looked at the big fat round face close to him. He asked, "I have a question." Churn Pippi asked doubtfully, "What question?" Ning Ke said seriously, "I entered the second floor of the academy to cultivate and learn, not to enjoy the scenery. You took me around today, but it seems that no one told me what I should learn and how to learn. First of all, you are now in the no-doubt state. The chi of heaven and earth that you can control is pitifully little, so there are many things that you can't learn at all. Secondly, the learning in the back of the mountain is basically self-cultivation. According to the directions set by the teacher, we learn by ourselves. If there is something that we don't understand, we can ask eldest brother. Now that the teacher and eldest brother haven't come back, of course, you can only learn by yourself. Eldest brother, what state is he in now? No one knows except the headmaster of academy. I even suspect that eldest brother doesn't know himself. There you go again. You go again. I'm telling the truth. Because we always feel that eldest brother seems to have never cared about such things as state. I suddenly thought of a question. If eldest senior brother really knows everything and is the top figure in all fields, then why don't fifth senior brother and eighth senior brother pester him to play chess? As far as I know, games like playing chess or football are the most likely to cause violence. No one cares whether the other party is eldest brother or not. Chen Pippi suddenly laughed. He thought of something and couldn't help shaking his head. He sighed and said, "That's because eldest brother has two most wonderful characteristics. It is because of these two characteristics that no one will pester him to play chess or do other things." "What characteristics?" Ning Ke asked curiously. "Eldest brother does things very seriously, very seriously. So he moves very slowly, very slowly." "How slowly?" "You can't imagine it. Even if I have to wait for the headmaster of academy to return, I have to do something in the back mountain." "You will have a lot of things to do in the future." Ning Ke suddenly felt that something was wrong. He hesitated and asked, "For example?" Chen Pippi looked at him sympathetically and said, "For example." At this moment, Ning Ke finally remembered that when he visited his senior brothers and sisters in the academy today, Chen Pippi occasionally showed a look of pity. He vaguely guessed something and asked in a low voice, "Now that I have become the youngest brother, do you feel that your life has ushered in a new and joyful stage?" Chen Pippi looked at him with a smile and said, "Yes. In the future, I will no longer be forced to listen to those elegant songs every day. I will no longer be forced by fourth brother to draw lines on the sand table every day. I will no longer be forced by sixth brother to step on the water cart every day. I will no longer be forced by seventh sister to plant flags and draw lines in the fog every day. I will no longer be forced by 11th brother to discuss those misty things every day. I will no longer be forced by second brother to calculate those mountain-like numbers every day." Ning Ke said thoughtfully, "Because I am the youngest now." Chen Pippi patted him on the chest and said gratefully, "The academy wins because of the youngest brother." Ning Ke smiled and pushed his hand away. He rested his hand on his pillow and looked up at the sky. He thought that he had to cherish today's leisure time and did not want to talk to him anymore. "I know you are a person with big ideas and big ambitions." Chen Pippi suddenly looked up at the sky and said, "You cared about the states of senior brothers and sisters because you wanted to surpass them. In fact, I personally do not agree with this way of life because it is too tiring." Ning Ke did not look back at him. He stared at the birds flying lower and lower in the blue sky. He looked at their soft white bellies under their black wings and murmured, "Living is a tiring thing. I don't know what you experienced when you were a child, but I think sometimes you need to be broad-minded." "Are you saying that I am a narrow-minded person? That my crab porridge was fed to pigs?" "You know that's not what I mean. I mean you don't need to guard against senior brothers and sisters. They are all good people." Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, "When I was 4 years old, I met a good person, and then I found that the good person wanted to eat me. Of course, I don't think senior brothers and sisters are such people. But I just met them, and it is inevitable that I will be a little defensive. You don't need to worry too much about me becoming a psychopath. If I wanted to be a psychopath, I would have changed when I was a child." Chen Pippi turned to look at his side face and said, "At least here, you really don't need to be too vigilant. You can relax and live a happy life. The back of the mountain of the academy is a good place. You should cherish it." "I understand. I will cherish it." Ning Ke said seriously, "You have stayed in the back of the mountain for so many years. Are you bored? Of course, sometimes. Otherwise, how could I know you? Ning Ke looked back at him and asked curiously, When will you return to West Hill? Chen Pippi did not know what unbearable memory this question reminded him of, and his expression was a little ugly. Ning Ke stared at his eyes and asked seductively, Is it related to women? Chen Pippi swallowed with difficulty, and said in a slightly hoarse voice, It has nothing to do with you. Ning Ke laughed and bumped his shoulder. He asked, Speaking of which, what kind of women do you like? Mature men often talked about money and things in bed when they talked about women, while young men would talk about simple things like liking women. But no matter what kind, women were always the most interesting subjects to talk about. Hearing this question, Chen Pippi suddenly became interested and said, Do you remember what I wrote in my first letter? Ning Ke nodded. Forget about those. Those were just me scolding people. Chen Pippi said with a smile, The girl I like must have long black hair, a small figure, and clean eyes. Of course, she must be good-looking. It would be best if she can have a red face. Ning Ke asked in surprise, That's it? After thinking for a moment, Chen Pippi added with a solemn expression, It doesn't matter if she is independent and strong, even if she is fierce. No woman can beat a cultivation genius like me, but she must be a good person. Ning Ke always felt that there seemed to be some years of pain hidden in this sentence. But thinking that when Chen Pippi escaped from West Hill and came to the academy, he was only a little more than 10 years old, so it was impossible for him to have a love debt, Ning Ke could not help but feel confused. At this moment, Chen Pippi's eyes suddenly brightened. He pointed to the stream at the foot of the slope and said, Look, that's second brother's goose. A fat big white goose walked to the stream, shaking its big butt. It had a small bamboo basket in its mouth, and no one knew what was in the basket. It put its thick hard beak into the bamboo basket, and then into the calm flowing stream. There was a sound of disturbance in the stream. Countless fish swam over happily and gathered in front of the big white goose, pecking at it from time to time. However, it seemed to be very orderly. After eating, the fish quickly retreated and made way for the fish behind them. The big white goose looked up from the water, proudly raising its white neck and quacking twice to the sky. Then it put the things in the bamboo basket into the stream again, and then kept repeating this action, showing great patience. Ning Ke was directly shocked by the scene by the stream. The big white goose was actually feeding the fish. The goose raised by second brother comes to feed the fish every day, as if it is proud to think that this is the most important task in its life. It is just like second brother scolds us every day, and he is proud to think that this is the most important task in his life. Chen Pippi stood beside him and said with a smile. Ning Ke was shocked and speechless, thinking that the back of the mountain of the academy was really the most awesome place in the world. After crossing Min Mountain and going all the way north, there was a naturally formed pass in the far north wilderness, which was even more desolate than the wilderness. In the wilderness south of the pass, a team of thousands of women, children, old and weak were walking with difficulty. The night this year was much longer than in previous years, and the temperature became colder. The tribes of the great northern wilderness, which were known for their ability to withstand the cold, could no longer bear the increasingly harsh environment. They were forced to leave their hometown where they had lived for more than 1,000 years, stepping on the melted mud of snow and mud to move south. The tribes of the great northern wilderness, which consisted of hundreds of thousands of people, had been away from the central plains for too long, so long that many people had forgotten the existence of the southern region in the world, and so long that they had long been forgotten by the prosperous and rich world. As the night lengthened and the temperature dropped, apart from these poor tribal people, the animals and beasts that originally lived in colder areas were the first to give up. Listening to the faint shrill cries coming from the far north of the pass, the respectable old people in the migrating tribes had a solemn expression on their faces, and their wrinkles were full of sadness and helplessness. As for the women in furs, Their eyes were full of despair. As hunters for a living, they could clearly judge the scale of this group of beasts invading south from the extremely cold region from the screams. If these ferocious beasts caught up with the tribe, then the tribe would usher in a disaster. The pass was a mess, and the snow was full of stains. A young girl wrapped tightly in rotten fur stood in the snow. She wore a pair of black boots, and her beautiful black hair was braided into a large braid under her leather hat, swaying gently behind her to her knees. The beast's tail on her collar did not cover her fresh and cute eyes, and her little face was flushed red from the cold wind. She did not look more than 15 years old. Listening to the mournful cries of the wild beasts, she tightly gripped the hilt of her knife and stared at the black line in the distance. Her body trembled slightly because of her nervousness, but her clear eyes became brighter and brighter. The sound of hooves became clearer, and the faint eyes of the snow wolves appeared on the wilderness like stars. The atmosphere was depressing and horrible. The girl looked there nervously and suddenly shouted in a childish voice, "Tang Xiaotang, you want to be the strongest woman in the world. Of course you won't die so early." As soon as she finished speaking, she pulled the knife out of the snow. The knife was red, very curved and big, longer and wider than her small body. She held it on her shoulder like a bloody crescent moon. She held the red moon knife, shouting like a mad woman, and rushed to the snowfield direwolves all over the mountains and wilderness. "It's very rough, I will fix the first chapter tomorrow, but it's enough to be awesome. 9,500 words, and the last picture, I am relieved. The goose feeding the fish is a real story, but I forgot that it was a goose from Tongji or Fudan University. I also think it's awesome." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 169. All the way to the south, fighting with wild beasts everywhere, fighting against hunger and cold, the fur of the snowfield direwolves was stuck together by blood and dirty water, stained with dirt, and the original snow-white color could no longer be seen. Because of the long-term starvation, their bodies were extremely thin, and the bones above their forelegs were protruding. From time to time, stinky saliva dripped from their bloody mouths, which were exhaling hot mist. However, no matter how weak they were, the snowfield direwolves were still the kings of this extremely cold world. Hundreds of huge wolves, which were as big as small mountains, stood side by side in the wilderness with a sense of discipline, like an insurmountable continuous mountain range. The snowfield direwolves silently rushed to the front of the mountain pass, and coldly stared at the little girl who was rushing towards them, as if they were watching a piece of moving fresh meat. Several young male wolves behind them were a little restless, but they did not dare to make any rash moves. Their breathing became more and more intense, and the light in their eyes became more and more ferocious and greedy. A low roar came from the wolf pack, and a strong snowfield direwolf rushed out of the wolf pack alone. It lowered its head and opened its mouth, panting like a mountain, and rushed towards the girl at the mountain pass. Even if a snowfield direwolf was on all fours, it was still taller than the two girls combined. The contrast between the huge wolf body and the small body easily produced a sense of despair, and the thunder-like running sound intensified this sense of despair. The jumping distance of the snowfield direwolf was extremely terrifying. It seemed to be rushing forward clumsily, but in fact it was very fast. In the blink of an eye, the snowfield direwolf had rushed hundreds of feet away, and rushed to the girl. The snowfield direwolf's strong hind legs suddenly stomped on the ground, and its upper back suddenly sank. It exerted all its strength, and its claws slapped towards the little girl's body like lightning. A huge shadow appeared in the wilderness, and two furry and stinky claws tore the cold air, covering Tang Xiaotang's fresh and lovely face almost at the same time as the shadow. However, there was no fear in her eyes. She slightly bent her legs, and her body bounced up in an extremely strange way, avoiding the pounce, and bounced up 10 meters high into the air. Tang Xiaotang, who had bounced into the air, looked down at the tall snowfield direwolf from above. She held the huge machete tightly with both hands and chopped down hard. A red moon tore through the cold air and accurately chopped the middle of the wolf's head, making a crisp sound. The eyeballs of this strong snowfield direwolf seemed to be bigger than a human head. As a very thin bloody wound suddenly appeared on the wolf's head, the bloodthirsty and indifferent expression in these two terrifying eyeballs suddenly turned into a sense of despair. With a soft sound, Tang Xiaotang's black leather boots stepped heavily on the ground of the wilderness, cracking a few pieces of thin ice that had just been frozen. She dragged the ridiculously heavy machete and quickly walked out of the shadow under her feet. The huge body of the snowfield direwolf collapsed like a mountain, and of course it did not hit Tang Xiaotang. She stared at a certain direction in the wolf pack, and a trace of determination flashed across her fresh and lovely face. Dragging the huge machete, she suddenly accelerated in the splashing dust of the wolf's body, and once again sprinted towards the mountain-like giant wolf pack in front of her. An extremely overbearing roar came from the back of the snowfield direwolf pack. One could vaguely feel the irritation and anger after its dignity was challenged in the roar. With this low roar, the whole wolf pack began to roar, and the frozen wilderness ground trembled slightly. Hundreds of prairie snowfield direwolves quickly spread out and began to besiege the girl. The huge and heavy red machete was dragged on the black wilderness ground, making a harsh friction sound, and from time to time, a few faint sparks could be seen. Tang Xiaotang did not seem to care that the ridiculously huge machete in her hand would be worn by the hard ground. She just gritted her teeth and lowered her head, continuing to rush forward. Only when the giant wolves rushed to her did she raise the huge machete with difficulty to chop it down. The heavy and huge machete was lifted with difficulty and slowly chopped down, like a red crescent moon moving randomly in the night sky. However, those snowfield direwolves, which were like wind and thunder, could not avoid such a slow machete. Under the red crescent moon, they howled and fell to the ground, and their huge legs flew everywhere with blood gushing out. In an instant, 3 snowfield direwolves fell under the girl's red machete. 2 snowfield direwolves howled and jumped down from the sky, and the strong wind with a foul smell hit Tang Xiaotang's beast tail around her neck, making a sound. She bent her legs and bounced into the air again. However, the snowfield direwolves were very intelligent, and they had already guessed her next move when they besieged her. A strong wind came from the side, and a snowfield direwolf made a successful sneak attack and directly knocked her into the air. In front of Tang Xiaotang, there were already 3 snowfield direwolves roaring and leaping up. Their sharp claws had already stretched out from the festering fur, and were ready to tear her petite body apart like a knife. A childish and angry voice sounded in the wilderness. Tang Xiaotang forcibly twisted her body in the air, and the huge red machete in her hand swept across everything like lightning. The strong air splashed in front of the blade, and she barely blocked the insidious ambush of the wolves, avoided the 6 horrible claws, and hit the head of a snowfield direwolf dangerously. Tang Xiaotang stretched out her hand and grabbed the hair of the direwolf. She twisted her wrist, and the blade drew a strange arc, and directly pierced into the direwolf's eye socket. With a shrill and painful howl, she jumped down from the direwolf, and dragged the huge machete on her feet. Panting, she sprinted to the center of the direwolf group again. There was no expression on her face, and there was no fear or excitement in her clear eyes, but only extraordinary firmness, as if no danger or difficulty, even the horrible death, could stop her. The battle between the little girl and the snowfield direwolves was still going on. At least 7 snowfield direwolves had fallen under the enchantingly red giant machete, and the corner of her mouth had begun to bleed. No one knew when she was injured in the battle. The red giant machete looked extremely heavy. In the process of advancing, she often had to drag the machete to walk on the ground, which was extraordinarily difficult. It gave people a feeling that she was almost unable to lift the machete. Every time the red giant machete fell to the ground, she always felt that it must be the last time, and she would never have the strength to pick it up again. But the strange thing was, every time at that moment, she could lift the heavy giant machete again. Every time the red giant machete slowly cut through the cold air, she always felt that it must be the last time, and she would never have the strength to cut it again. But the strange thing was, every time at that moment, she would always be able to swing the heavy giant machete. Compared to her small body, the snowfield great wolf's body was like a small hill. She tightly held the huge red machete in her hand, and compared with her small body, it was exaggeratedly like a red moon. The impact of the mountain-like direwolves could not make her fall down, and the heavy red giant machete could not slow her down. When the snowfield direwolves rushed in front of her, the red giant machete would definitely cut out slowly but absolutely accurately, leaving a hill-like corpse of the direwolves. The battle between the girl and the wolves was silent, solemn, boring and chilling. There was no shouting, no rest or pause, only the monotonous collision between the red giant machete and the snowfield direwolves. If the people in the prosperous southern world had the chance to witness such a battle with their own eyes, if they had the chance to see this adorable little girl covered in ragged fur and blushing face colliding with the terrifying pack of wolves, they would have personally experienced what a real battle was and what kind of attitude was called fearlessness. The fighting wisdom of the snowfield direwolves absolutely could not be underestimated. Although these kings from the cold region of the far north were fighting in a foreign land today, and although they had been suffering from hunger and cold for a long time, they still could not be resisted by ordinary people. Tang Xiaotong's injuries became more and more serious, and her footsteps became heavier and heavier. The red giant machete in her small hand seemed to become heavier and heavier. Although the wolves still could not force her into a desperate situation, she still could not rush into the depths of the wolf pack. Deep in the wolf pack that had been silent for a long time sounded again, and this time the sound was particularly serious, no longer angry, but with a hint of appreciation. However, when Tang Xiaotang heard the sound, her bright eyes flashed with a bad look. She guessed what the wolves wanted to do, so she waved the red giant machete in her hand and was ready to retreat to the mountain pass. Unexpectedly, she was blocked by several young and strong giant wolves. The snowfield direwolves began to divide their forces. They respected the strength of this female human, but they did not want to let go of the tribesmen who were walking slowly in the south of the mountain pass, because those tribesmen were very likely to be their last food this month. 10 young and strong snowfield direwolves surrounded Tang Xiaotang. Their smelly mouths were dripping with saliva, and the gray fur on their bodies stood up. They tried their best to keep Tang Xiaotang in the wilderness. More snowfield direwolves silently walked behind them, and walked towards the mountain pass. No wolf looked back at the 10 young and strong companions, even if they knew that most of them would die under the machete of the female human. After receiving the order from their leader, the 10 giant wolves' desperate look in their eyes had already turned into ferocity after obedience. They stared at the human girl who was surrounded in the middle, and the wolf claws stretched out of the fur glowed with a steel-like light. Tang Xiaotang suddenly looked back to the south, and her black braid behind her swayed in the wind. Her hair under the leather hat brushed her blood-stained lips. She looked at the wolves that were about to pass through the mountain pass, and thought of the women, children, and the old and weak in the south of the mountain pass. Her bright eyes dimmed. Suddenly, something very strange happened at the mountain pass. The strong snowfield direwolf who was responsible for clearing the way was directly shaken into the air by a powerful and terrible force, and turned into a small black shadow, whining in the air, looking like a begging wild dog. Then the second and the third giant wolf were shaken into the air. An unarmed man appeared at the mountain pass. He was casually wrapped in fur-like clothes, and many parts of his body were exposed. His rock-like muscles were as strong as steel, and it seemed that he was not afraid of the cold at all. He completely ignored the angry roaring wolves in front of him, and directly stared at the back of the wolf pack, saying, "Retreat or die. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 170. The words of the man in leather robe were cold, calm, and powerful. But the snowfield direwolves didn't stop. They roared and rushed to the mountain pass again. Maybe they didn't understand, or hunger was always more terrible than fear. The collective charge of dozens of direwolves made the frozen ground of the wilderness tremble, and the thin ice covering the mud was shattered. The momentum was extremely amazing. A leg that was harder than steel kicked out, directly shattering the claws of the giant wolf in front. Then, the second kick landed on the shoulder blade of the giant wolf. A huge force burst out from the contact between the sole of the foot and the fur, tearing up a clump of long and dirty wolf fur. The giant wolf howled miserably and rolled out, rolling a deep mark on the wilderness. It did not stop rolling until it knocked away the two giant wolves that were pouncing on it from behind. However, it no longer had the strength to stand up. The man in leather robe slowly took back his leg in the air, and looked at the direwolves that were getting closer and closer. Suddenly several bloody flames burst out from his bare legs. A gust of wind rose without any warning, and he didn't bend his knees or bend his legs. His body suddenly bounced up in the air, like a stone that was shaken by the power of the earth, until it was more than 30 meters high in the sky, and then fell down at a high speed, smashing a direwolf on the hard ground. With a loud bang, the ice gravel and the black mud splashed very high, as if there was an explosion. The man in leather robe didn't stop and then bounced up again. But this time, he didn't face the cold sky, but the direwolves that were attacking at high speed. He rushed into the direwolves like a lightning, and when he had time to punch, he just punched, and when he had time to punch, he just used his body to collide with the direwolves. He didn't even dodge the sharp claws of the direwolves, and he didn't even bother to look at them. It seemed that he was very confident in his body's strength. After all, the direwolves were several orders of magnitude heavier than him, so the man in leather robe collided with them like a stone. Although he successfully broke the formation of the direwolves and slowed down their speed, his body would be knocked to the ground every time he collided with them. His leather robe would be torn by the direwolf's claws, and his animal skin would burst like flowers. After falling to the ground, the man in leather robe stood up indifferently and once again collided with the direwolves. Although his animal skin had been torn into many pieces and hung around his waist, there was no emotion on his face. The enormous impact force and the sharp and terrifying wolf claws drew out streaks of white marks on his steel-like skin, but they were unable to penetrate deep into his internal organs. The few bloody wounds were not even worth mentioning, unable to cause any fatal damage to him at all. Although there was a big difference in size, the strength and physical strength of the direwolves were reversed. The fierce and powerful direwolves of the cold region had no way to deal with such an indestructible Iron Man. The battle had just started, and didn't last for a long. The direwolves didn't last long. In front of the entrance there was a large, empty circle. A low roar sounded, and an order was issued. The direwolves panted heavily, formed a semicircle along the entrance, and temporarily stopped charging. They stared at the naked male human at the entrance, and their huge eyes, which were usually cruel and indifferent, finally showed the emotion of fear. Nobody knew when, but the 10 strong direwolves that besieged Tang Xiaotang also stopped attacking, and black blood dripped from their long white hair, which looked very miserable. They stared at the red giant knife in the little girl's hand, and growled from time to time with stinky saliva dripping from their mouths. But no one dared to disobey the order of their leader, and they reluctantly made way for her with their sharp teeth. Tang Xiaotang dragged the heavy red giant knife, and panted to the direction of the mountain pass. On the way, she untied the tail on her neck, wiped the blood from her mouth and nose, and then casually inserted it into her belt. Walking to the side of the man in leather robe at the mountain pass, Tang Xiaotang turned around and stood side by side with him. They stood side by side, facing the hundreds of direwolves that were almost driven crazy by cold and hunger. There was a slight commotion at the back of the direwolves, and then they separated to make a way. Faintly, a bigger direwolf slowly walked out. The fur of this direwolf was smooth, soft and snow-white, and with its huge body, it looked as beautiful and proud as a snow mountain. But what was strange was that this huge direwolf was extremely gentle, and its eyes were full of tranquility and obedience. When it walked, it was especially gentle, as if it was extremely afraid of stepping on something by mistake. Tang Xiaotang said with surprise, "Wow, the leader of this direwolf is so beautiful?" The man in leather robe said, "This is a female wolf. She is not the leader, but the wife of the leader." Hearing this, Tang Xiaotang was stunned. When she looked carefully, she saw an extremely shocking scene, and her body became slightly stiff. In front of that beautiful and huge direwolf, there was a small body moving slowly. All the snowfield direwolves that saw the small figure lowered their heads, which were usually arrogant and cruel, and put their feet on the ground to show their absolute respect and obedience. Some of the snowfield direwolves even whimpered in fear. That small body was also a direwolf. This wolf was actually very strong. It was half the height of a human, and it didn't walk slowly. However, it looked very small and slow in the midst of the snowfield direwolves that were as big as hills. This was a very ordinary direwolf, but it had a beautiful white direwolf as its wife, and it could command such a group of horrible direwolves. So the more ordinary the direwolf was, the more extraordinary it was. The leader of the direwolves was actually an ordinary male direwolf. Even the most knowledgeable hunters in the northern tribes had never seen such a ridiculous and creepy scene. But this was the real scene. The ordinary male wolf came to the middle of the wolf pack and slowly raised his head. Looking at the pair of human men at the mountain pass, an irritable but vigilant look appeared in his eyes, as if he could perceive some kind of strange wisdom from them. After a moment of silence, the leader of the direwolves stretched out its left paw and gently patted the hard ground of the wilderness twice, and then let out a sharp but not aggressive howl. The man in leather robe took a step forward, stared at the eyes of the leader of the direwolves, and slowly shook his head. The ordinary male direwolf stretched out its right paw, and its two paws were in front of it. Its whole body slowly arched, and the gray-brown hair on its waist suddenly stood up, as if it was a ring of steel needles. It took a deep breath, and the ring of hair on its waist quickly moved forward with the movement of its body, and turned into a lion's crown on its neck. Then a horrible howl burst out. Ow! Ow! The howl of the direwolves reverberated in the silent wilderness, and immediately caused a strong wind. The few ice and snow mixed in the cold-resistant grass and mud were shaken by the thunder-like howl, and flew all over the sky, wrapped in a large amount of invisible sharp power, like a hurricane blowing towards the entrance. After hearing the howl, all the direwolves behind the ordinary male direwolves suddenly lowered their bodies in fear, and trembled all over. It seemed that they wanted to bury their huge bodies into the ground of the wilderness. The largest and beautiful female direwolf seemed to be the only one among the direwolves that was not affected by the howl. She stood behind the ordinary male direwolf, and covered his body with her own body. At the same time, she vigilantly stared at the direwolves and the entrance of the mountain. It seemed that if anyone wanted to attack her husband at this time, she would instantly tear him into pieces. The howl of the direwolves and the hurricane came together. Tang Xiaotang took a step back with her left foot, and deeply stepped into the hard ground of the wilderness. She held the heavy red broadsword in front of her eyes, and her small body kept trembling because of the wind. It seemed that she would be blown away and swallowed at any time. From time to time, some ice and branches hit the broad surface of the broadsword like arrows, making a crisp sound. The power from the wind was so strong that even if it only carried some ice, branches, and mud, it still carried a terrible power. Tang Xiaotang slightly bent her arms, buried her head, and gritted her teeth. It seemed that it was very difficult for her to do so. However, the man in the leather robe still didn't dodge, but just stood in front of the hurricane caused by the howl of the direwolves. Standing in front of Tang Xiaotang, he blocked most of the attack for her. Those strong mud, branches, and invisible tearing power hit his naked body, making a burst of metal friction sound, and even splashing countless white air turbulence. Suddenly, the man in the leather robe took a deep breath, and his face became red as if it was burning. He took another step forward, and drew an arc with his right hand. Then he lowered his body from his waist, and punched the direwolf from a distance of more than 30 meters. With a bang, the air wave caused by the fist tore the hurricane caused by the howl of the direwolf, and hit the head of the direwolf fiercely. The head of the direwolf was tilted by the heavy punch, and blood flowed down from its white, sharp teeth. Judging from its expression, it should not be seriously injured, but the howl of the direwolf was forced to stop. The man in the leather robe took another step forward, pulled off the ragged fur hanging on his waist, and gave a wild and arrogant howl to the direwolves close at hand. Howl. His roar didn't contain any power, but it was filled with an extremely valiant aura. It was as if he was announcing to the pack of wolves from the north that this wasteland was under his protection, and they shouldn't even think about taking a step forward. The ordinary direwolf silently looked at the powerful male human for a long time, and then gave a low howl. With its howl, the huge direwolves behind him silently retreated further with unwilling expressions, and the snow-capped female direwolf who had been guarding him silently retreated to the back of the direwolves after a moment of silence. Tang Xiaotang blankly looked at the retreating direwolves, and subconsciously reached out her hand to wipe the small blood on her face, and curiously asked, "Are they retreating? I really don't understand why these direwolves listen to him." The reason is actually very simple. The man in the leather robe replied, "Because he is the strongest." The snowfield direwolves retreated hundreds of feet in a very disciplined manner, but the seemingly ordinary male wolf did not leave. It was still squatting on the ground not far from the mountain pass, silently watching Tang Xiaotang and the man in the leather robe. "What does he want to do?" Tang Xiaotang asked. The man in the leather robe did not answer, but silently looked there, as if he was waiting for something. At this moment, the huge female wolf, that was as beautiful as a snowy mountain, slowly walked over from the back of the pack. She walked to the side of the ordinary male wolf and meekly lowered her head. She loosened her mouth and placed a very small ball next to the male wolf. The little ball was extremely fluffy and snow-white. It looked like a snowball, and it would occasionally move. The snow-capped female direwolf gently touched the small snowball with her huge beak, and her expression was full of attachment and reluctance. The ordinary direwolf slightly turned his head to look at the female direwolf, and looked a little unhappy and agitated. But looking at the sadness in his wife's eyes, the direwolf did not do anything, but gently rubbed his wife's huge head twice, as if to express comfort. Seeing this, Tang Xiaotang knew what the direwolf wanted to do. She could not help raising her hand to cover her mouth, and her eyes were full of shock. Then she looked up at the man in the leather robe beside her. It seemed that the man in the leather robe did not expect that the ordinary direwolf would do this. After a moment of silence, he resolutely turned around and walked towards the pass without looking back. The ordinary direwolf looked at his back and made a sad low growl. All of a sudden, a shadow covered its body. It raised its head and saw that the female human had come to its front. Judging from her expression and movements, it seemed that she had completely forgotten to be vigilant against its attack. Tang Xiaotang held the snow-like direwolf in her hands like holding a treasure, and didn't care about it at all. If the seemingly ordinary direwolf attacked her, she was very likely to be in danger. She opened her bright eyes and looked at the direwolf in front of her and said, "Don't worry, he dares not to disobey me, so it's better to follow me than him." The ordinary direwolf stared at the direwolf in her arms, and after a moment of silence, it turned around and left the direwolf group. The snow-capped female direwolf reluctantly looked at the direwolf in her arms. Tang Xiaotang looked up at it and said, "I promise to treat it well." A deep and majestic howl sounded, and hundreds of direwolves walked towards the vast wilderness in the west. A thin direwolf could be vaguely seen on the back of the tallest snow-white female direwolf in the middle of the direwolf group. Tang Xiaotang looked at the wolves that were moving further and further away, and then looked at the corpses of the giant wolves in front of the mountain pass. She suddenly asked, "Can they find a new coniferous forest before the night comes?" The man in the leather robe glanced at the sleeping white direwolf cub in her arms and said, "They are wolves, and we are human beings. Snow deer gnaw the bark of the coniferous forest, and they eat the flesh of snow deer. But we can gnaw the bark, eat the venison, and kill the direwolves when necessary. Warmth is not needed to survive in the wilderness. I don't care about it, and you shouldn't care about it either." Tang Xiaotang ignored him, and held the direwolf cub in her arms tighter, and said, "Anyway, you don't need to raise it." The small wounds caused by the direwolf claws in the previous battle had already become faint white lines, and those white lines had disappeared without a trace. No trace could be found on his skin, which was as rough as steel. No one knew what kind of martial arts he had practiced, and his recovery ability was so strong. The wind and snow gradually rose, and the night was coming, and the temperature was getting lower. After confirming that the direwolf group had gone far, the two left the natural pass, and walked towards the south of the wilderness faster and faster. In front of them, there were many tribes of the northern wilderness moving south. The strong men of each tribe gathered in the south in advance to fight with the barbarians on the grassland. The old, weak, women, and children were very vulnerable to the attack of the direwolves, and they still had to travel for a long time. Tang Xiaotang followed the man in the leather robe with the direwolf cub in her arms, and asked questions about the strange world in the south from time to time. "Are we really going to the south? I think it's good to live in the wilderness. Tang, what is the world in the south like? You never told me." "Tang, have you been to the Tang Empire?" "Tang, since the Tang Empire is our enemy, and it was those people who drove us to the northern wilderness, why do we have the surname Tang? Do they want us to remember the hatred from thousands of years ago? But it's really boring. I'm really not used to living in a strange place. But I heard that there is a city in the south, and I don't know what it looks like." The man in the leather robe called Tang kept silent until he heard these words. He stopped and stood silently on the wilderness in the wind and snow. Suddenly he turned his head and looked at the little girl who was playing with the direwolf cub. Then he remembered that she had been living with him in the wilderness since she was born, and had never seen a city. The city is very big and there are many buildings. It's very lively and prosperous. The man in the leather robe recalled the cities in the Central Plains he saw when he was young, and explained clumsily. Tang Xiaotang looked up curiously and asked, "What is a building?" After a moment of silence, the man in the leather robe said, "It's something like a tent." Tang Xiaotang smiled cutely and said in a childish voice, "I know. A city is a big tent." The man in the leather robe suddenly felt a little depressed. He looked at the little girl quietly and said in a low voice, "It's too hard to live in the wilderness. You shouldn't live like this." Tang Xiaotang answered, "Where is it not hard? I heard that there is a good place." After a long silence, the man in the leather robe said, "There is an academy in the south of Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Empire." Tang Xiaotang raised her arm and gently poked the cyan talisman on his back. She said with a smile, "Didn't you say that people in the south call us the remnants of the devil's doctrine? I'm going to find my master. It's been almost 23 years. The man in the leather robe looked at her and said, "No one knows where he is hiding in the world. It may take a long time to find him. During this time, without my protection, I have to find a way to put you in a safe place." "Isn't it safe to stay in the tribe?" Tang Xiaotang asked. The man in the leather robe shook his head and said, "Since we are going to the south, we should fight with the barbarians on the grassland first. Eventually, we will alarm those people in the Central Plains." Tang Xiaotang thought of the strange Central Plains and the academy in Chang, and that she had heard of several times. She couldn't help feeling a little confused. Looking at her expression, the man in the leather robe said, "The world treats people harshly and ruthlessly, but we can still survive. This shows that only people are the most powerful existence in the world. You don't have to be afraid of anything." "I understand." Tang Xiaotang looked up at him and said, "Whether I can enter the academy or not, I will live well." The man in the leather robe said, "Before I find my master, I have to kill someone." "Who?" "A general of the Tang Empire called Xiahou." "His surname is Xiahou?" "No, his name is Xiahou." "I understand, just like you." "Yes, my surname is not Tang. My name is Tang." Looking at the snow wolf cub in her arms, Tang Xiaotang suddenly thought of something. She raised her fresh and lovely face and opened her bright eyes. She asked, "I have a question that I don't understand. The size difference between the male wolf and his wife is so big. How can they give birth to a child?" The man in the leather robe looked a little stiff. After a while, he replied, "I am your brother. You should ask your husband about this question." The wind and snow started again. It was very cold in the wilderness, and the conversation between the brother and sister was even colder. In the southern suburb of Chang'an, on the stone path in the back mountain of the academy. People's emotional needs always vaguely point to their most regrettable parts. So it is very understandable that you, a timid fat man, want to find a fresh, cute, small and strong little girl. Ning Ke looked at Chen Pippi and said seriously, "But I think you should lose weight. Otherwise, which girl can bear your 200 or 300 pounds of fat? The big difference in size is a problem after all." Chen Pippi ignored the sarcasm in his words. He broke off a branch and waved it like a child. He said, "So I just added a condition. That little girl must be strong." A woman painstakingly cultivates to be strong just to meet the condition of being suppressed by you? Ning Ke looked at him and shook his head helplessly. He said, "I guess if there is such a person, she will be suppressed by you, and you will be suppressed by her every day. You will never be able to stand up for the rest of your life." Chen Pippi smiled proudly and said, "Yes, she is strong. But is there any woman stronger than me in this world? Even if there is, it will be those old women hiding in the deep mountains. I can't be blind to find them." Ning Ke suddenly asked with a smile, "How about the woman from West Hill?" "Don't hit my face." Chen Pippi rubbed his chubby cheeks and said angrily, "If we really fight, how can that crazy woman be my opponent? I just don't want her brother to respect her brother, so I can't do it." Ning Ke said sincerely, "I wish that the girl you like in the future will have the fiercest brother in the world." Chen Pippi said sarcastically, "I am a peerless cultivation genius. There are only a few people who are stronger than me in the younger generation. The two senior brothers, the senior brother from West Hill, a mute, and a guy named Tang who is similar to the mute. Eldest brother and second brother don't have sisters. Do you think I will be so stupid to choose the sisters of the remaining 3 people to like?" Ning Ke sincerely reminded him, "Don't be too sure. Otherwise, how will you cry when that day comes? Don't laugh at me. Speaking of which, what kind of woman do you like? Like Sang Sang? Is Sang Sang a woman?" Ning Ke shook his head and said with a smile, "Woman? You might as well raise a dog." Chen Pippi said, "I will not tell 7th sister about this." Ning Ke said seriously, "A bowl of crab porridge." Chen Pippi stopped threatening and thought of the previous topic. He shook his head and said, "Dogs are for eating, not for raising." Ning Ke's thoughts went back to a long time ago, as if he saw the snow-white dog in the flower bed. After a long silence, he shook his head and said, "I just want to raise a Samoyed in my life, and then I will name it Little White. Of course I wrote this with my heart. If you can see my painstaking efforts and interest in correcting the wrong words and sentences in 4 chapters, please vote for me for free. I have been too quiet these days, which is not a good thing. I bow and thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 171. Memories were just memories after all, not to mention the memories from another world that he could not return to. Ning Ke was absent-minded for a moment and quickly returned to the real world. He remembered what Chen Pippi had said unintentionally and asked, "Who's the mute?" Chen Pippi saw from his eyes that he could not refuse. After a moment of hesitation, he replied, "The world wayfarer of Buddhism." Ning Ke slowly raised his eyebrows and felt that the 4 words "world wayfarer" were really domineering. He paused for a moment and then continued to ask, "Your senior brother from West Hill must be the world wayfarer of Haotian Taoism. Then who is the mute surnamed Tang?" "The world wayfarer of Devil's Doctrine." Chen Pippi looked at him and said seriously, "A very mysterious guy." Ning Ke shook his head and thought of these people who no one in the world knew but stood at the top. He thought of his ocean of qi and mountain of snow only with 10 acupoints opened, and could not help feeling a little frustrated. He sighed and said, "I'm still in the no-doubt state and can't even learn many Dharma access in the academy. I really don't know when I can stand shoulder to shoulder with those people." "You don't need to feel so inferior. No matter which sect you are in, you will be a very good disciple under 20 years of age." "Why don't I feel this way? I always feel that all the cultivators I meet are much more vigorous than me." Chen Pippi looked at him and said sympathetically, "You met Chao Xiaoshu in Chang'an, and you met me in the academy. There are a bunch of abnormal geniuses in the back mountain, and Longqing is also a genius in the eyes of the world. It is indeed easy to see yourself as a fool after getting in touch with real geniuses like us. But you must be soberly aware that you have left Xie Qingyun from South Jin Kingdom behind in less than half a year since you started cultivation. So although your innate aptitude is not good, you are also a genius in perception and learning. This seems to be the first time you have praised me," Ning Ke said. Chen Pippi shook his head and said with a smile, "In fact, I have praised you many times in private, but I just don't want you to know. But my ocean of qi and mountain of snow only has 10 acupoints open. This is a fact that can't be changed." The expression in Ning Ke's eyes was very calm. He did not feel inferior because of his innate aptitude. Instead, he was full of yearning and desire to explore the unknown world. He looked at Chen Pippi and asked seriously, "I've heard of the cultivation method of the Devil's Doctrine. It doesn't seem to require the number of acupoints in the snow mountain and ocean of qi. Instead, it directly absorbs the heaven and earth into the body." Chen Pippi didn't wait for him to finish his words and directly pressed his shoulder to stop him. With an unprecedented solemn expression, he said, "What exactly do you want to say? Don't tell me you want to cultivate the devil sex techniques? With the number of opened apertures in my snow mountain and ocean of qi, no matter how high my comprehension is and how hard I cultivate, if I continue to cultivate step by step, I will never be able to catch up with true geniuses like you." Ning Ke looked at him and replied, "You and those world wayfarers have already entered the knowing destiny state. In front of you, I'm just an ant. In fact, if Prince Longqing wants to kill me, he only needs to move his little finger and I won't be able to resist. I don't like this feeling at all. I want to catch up to you as soon as possible and even surpass you. A man's strength is limited, and the way of heaven has its own rules." Chen Pippi looked at him seriously and said, "Cultivation is a gift given by Haotian to human beings. There has always been only one path, and you have to persist on this path to know whether you can go through it or not. If you think that the road ahead is long and want to take a shortcut, then the final result will only be falling into the abyss. Ning-Ke still wanted to say something. Chen Pippi shook his head, and his chubby face showed a serious and cautious expression that was completely different from his usual expression. He looked at Ning-Ke and said in a low voice, "You've already entered the devil's way of thinking just now. If you don't change this wrong idea immediately, you will definitely burn your internal organs and eventually die of qi deviation. By then, how can you walk the world? You can only welcome death." Ning-Ke thought of what Liu Qingchen said during the journey last year. After a moment of silence, he said, "I know that only 1 out of 100 people who cultivate the devil's doctrine can survive in the end, but there are still people who can survive, and they are very powerful. You just said that the successor of the devil's doctrine, Serene Tang, even your senior brother Westhill, dare not say that he can defeat him. The key is not whether he can succeed or not, but whether this path is correct or not. The people of the devil's doctrine go against heaven and earth, forcibly absorbing the heaven and earth into their bodies, and vainly try to replace Haotian with human bodies to control the rules. And in order to make their flesh and blood strong enough to absorb the qi of heaven and earth, they have tried countless evil means, and even some devil's doctrine schools live by eating people. Like these evil sects, their bodies are already inhuman, and their thoughts are even more inhuman. Cultivating the devil's doctrine means cultivating the inhuman." Chen Pippi's expression was not as casual and natural as usual. He stared at Ning-Ke's eyes and said coldly, "Ning-Ke, I have to warn you, if I know that you have contacted the devil's doctrine, I will not just watch you explode and die, I will directly kill you." The devil's doctrine lived by eating people, or did they use this method to stimulate the spirit? If eating people is to be possessed by the devil, then the world is full of people who cultivate the devil's doctrine? Ning-Ke thought of the countless scenes he had seen during the great drought in the north, and the many scenes he did not want to recall when he was struggling to move forward at the foot of Min Mountain. His expression became a little stiff. After the devil's doctrine was defeated by the righteous, they sneaked into the wilderness. Now there are very few sects left in the Central Plains, and I believe that no one dares to eat people. Maybe some sects choose a more normal method of body cultivation? After a moment of silence, he said, "If the cultivation methods of those devil's doctrine schools do not harm the innocent, then why can't we try? The Academy stresses openness and tolerance. Why do you still care so much about the difference between the devil's doctrine and the devil's doctrine?" Chen Pippi shook his head and said seriously, "Even if those people in the devil's doctrine do not harm the innocent, they will also hurt themselves. The cultivation method that uses life as a bet is not a gift from Haotian, but more like they want to steal the light of Haotian. Even if there is no problem with the cultivation method of the devil's doctrine, this idea itself is wrong, and it will only turn people into inhumans." Ning-Ke asked thoughtfully, "How to distinguish right from wrong? How to distinguish between human and inhuman?" Chen Pippi looked into his eyes and said seriously, "People living in the world must know how to respect." Ning-Ke officially stepped on the road of cultivation and was proud of his success. Less than half a day later, he suddenly found a few higher peaks in the distance. Those peaks stood silently in the clouds, extremely high and steep. It seemed that he would never be able to climb them with his talent, so he inevitably felt a little sad. Besides feeling sad and lost, there was even some despair that he did not dare to say out. His snow mountain and ocean of qi had opened 10 acupoints, and he could barely cultivate. How could he be compared with those successors of various sects who had entered the knowing destiny state at a young age? If he could not cultivate in the past, it would be fine, because they were originally people of 2 different worlds. However, now that he was in the same world with those real powerhouses, he clearly realized how big the gap was. How could he shorten the gap in the shortest time? How could the snow mountain and ocean of Qi with only 10 acupoints open no longer become an obstacle to cultivation? In order to enter the back of the mountain of the academy, he, who confidently asked Chen Pippi to open the back door, naturally began to think of shortcuts or unorthodox methods. He had never met anyone from the Diabolism, except for the great sword master who played with broken fingers at the North Mountain Pass. He had not read any Diabolism cultivation manual, but only heard some introductions from Liu Qingchen on the journey. And it was these brief introductions that made him vaguely realize the possibility of success. Unfortunately, Liu Qingchen and Chen Pippi's serious and even cold attitude made him clearly realize that if he did not want to become Ling Huchong, who was chased by the Five Mountains Sword Sect, he had better not try this way. It would be good if he could become Ling Huchong, but the problem was that Ling Huchong had Ren Yingying, the saintess of the Diabolism, as his wife, and Ren Wuxing, the hierarch of the Diabolism, as his father-in-law. It would be a pleasure for him to cultivate the Diabolism divine skill through nepotism. But what did he have? He only had a little black handmaiden, and his best friend was the righteous of the righteous. Before Haotian's divine light and the righteous of the academy, Ning Ke finally realized that the devil's doctrine, which had already weakened, was really useless in this world. The difference between righteous and evil was like the Eiffel Tower in Paris, which was meaningless. The drama of the Devil's Land of Peach Blossom would eventually lead to a tragedy, and he had long made up his mind not to let his life become a tragedy. The Devil's doctrine was now like a rat crossing the street, which everyone wanted to kill. Ning Ke believed that if others knew that he had once been interested in the Devil's doctrine's cultivation method, he would definitely face a very miserable end. But Chen Pippi would not go so far as to sell him out. As his best friend, the fat man would not be like the law enforcement team of the judicial department of the West Hill Divine Palace, who would subconsciously set up the fire execution platform upon hearing the word devil. Even if the person who was tied to the fire execution platform was a poor guy who could change magic, it was still an academic discussion after all. Why should he be so serious? Thinking about these trivial things, Ning Ke went down the back of the mountain, and did not notice the strange looks from his former classmates in the study room. He walked out of the academy in a daze. Beside the meadow outside the academy, there were 2 horse carriages quietly waiting for him. Old Duan was sitting on the shaft of one of the carriages. The other carriage was also black. It was unknown what kind of wood the carriage was made of, but it looked extremely hard and thick. There were all kinds of complicated decorations on the carriage board, and the horse lowered its head and swayed gently in front of it, looking extremely bored. Ning Ke guessed who the owner of the carriage was. He said a few words to old Duan and asked him to take the carriage back to the city first. Then he tidied up his clothes and walked to the front of the black carriage. He bowed with hands folded in front and said, "Greetings, master." The curtain of the carriage was pulled up by an old hand. Master Yen Sei showed his head and yawned. He looked at Ning Ke and said angrily, "You promised to follow me in the afternoon. What time is it now? No matter how high the academy is, you are just in the no-doubt state. The headmaster of the academy hasn't come back yet. What can you learn? Why did you stay in there for such a long time? Did you lie on the grass and take a nap?" Ning Ke was shocked and thought that even this was seen through by him. Could it be that the divine talisman master could also tell fortunes? I don't want to pretend to be sad. Let me explain. My cervical vertebra is really not good recently. It's hard for me to write these 2 days. I will do it again next week when I feel better. Besides, I changed a little bit at the last part. I thought so when I wrote it, but it disappeared inexplicably when I wrote it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 172. The black horse carriage was running very fast on the official road, and the spring trees and green fields outside the window were almost pulled into pure green block. Ning Ke looked at the scenery outside the window with mixed feelings. He had just seen the proud goose and the strange man in the back of the mountain of the academy, and now a new and mysterious world was about to open its curtain to him. It was really too much for his eyes to take in. Ning Ke didn't know more about the most mysterious talisman Taoism in the legend, except that he saw an old Taoist burning a talisman outside a Taoist temple in Chang'an City. But sitting in the carriage made of stainless steel, which should be extremely heavy, he vaguely felt that he was already in the world of talisman Taoism. No matter how fast the carriage was running, the people in the carriage didn't feel the slightest bump, and the lonely horse in front of the soft rope couldn't carry such a heavy load. Yensei looked at his expression and said, "You seem to be thinking about something." Ning Ke turned around and looked at the dirty old Taoist. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "I'm thinking about what talisman is engraved on the carriage. It can actually reduce the weight just like magic." He didn't ask whether the carriage was engraved with talisman, but directly asked what talisman was engraved. This answer made Master Yensei quite satisfied, but the last word made him extremely unhappy. He frowned and said, "Talisman Taoism is talisman Taoism. What does it have to do with devil's doctrine?" Ning Ke just subconsciously classified this magical means beyond his daily experience as magic. He didn't know how harsh the word, devil's doctrine, was to the minister of offerings of South School of Haotian Taoism. The soft and joyful hoofbeats gradually slowed down, and the black carriage made of stainless steel stopped on the official road in the southern suburbs of Chang'an City. Master Yensei led Ning Ke down the carriage. He glanced at the pavilion beside the official road not far away and the thin poplar trees outside the pavilion. He turned back and said to Ning Ke, "Since you know there is talisman engraved on the carriage, try to feel it." Ning Ke was slightly stunned. He walked to the side of the carriage and carefully looked at the black carriage board. He looked very carefully and confirmed that the carriage board was indeed made of stainless steel. Those complicated decorations were deeply engraved into the steel by some kind of sharp blade, and then painted with a kind of glossy paint, so it looked extraordinarily beautiful and somewhat mysterious. The patterns were so complicated that they violated the principles of aesthetic. He looked at it for a very long time, yet was unable to find anything strange about it. A judgment gradually arose in his heart. The talisman markings that were truly effective shouldn't be this complicated. Those complicated lines that looked like branches and vines might be a smokescreen used to conceal the true talisman markings. He had read a few books on talisman Taoism in the old library, but those books were only introductions and did not have any objective understanding of talisman patterns. It was basically impossible to find the effective talisman pattern from such complicated patterns. However, since Master Yensei wanted him to feel it, it should be a kind of assessment. After pondering for a moment, he slowly closed his eyes, raised his arm, and used his fingertips to gently brush over the runes that were deeply embedded into the steel. Suddenly, he furrowed his brows. When he opened his eyes to look, there was nothing strange about the complicated decorations on the carriage. But now, when he closed his eyes and used his psyche power to control the chi of heaven and earth, he found that there was a layer on his fingertip. The layer was very thin, like an invisible membrane between his fingertips and the carriage. With a slight distraction of his psyche power, the membrane that he sensed disappeared instantly. Ning Ke was silent for a moment and entered the meditative state that he was best at. He began to use his psyche power to sense the slightest changes of the chi of heaven and earth. As expected, the invisible membrane appeared again between his fingertips and the carriage. This time, he was more prepared and his perception was more delicate. He could clearly feel that the membrane was flowing slowly. Master Yensei's voice rang in his ears. "What do you feel?" Ning Ke carefully sensed it. After a long silence, he seriously replied, "A very light flow of the qi of heaven and earth." Master Yensei continued to ask, "What kind of flow? What is it like?" Ninkei calmly replied, "Like water, but lighter than water, more empty. More like wind, but it can't be wind." Master Yensei looked at Ninkei beside the carriage. He slowly frowned and asked, "Why can't it be wind?" After a moment of silence, Ninkei replied, "Because the flow of the primordial qi on the talisman pattern is too regular, as if it goes in a fixed route, like in a complete system. But the wind is the flow of air, so it should not be regular." Master Yensei's tightly frowned eyebrows gradually relaxed. He looked at Ninkei's back with his eyes shining brightly. It seemed that he was praising Ninkei and also marveling at him, because Ninkei's performance at this moment had far exceeded his best imagination. Ninkei's fingers left the carriage. He looked back at Yensei and said unconfidently, "Master, I just said it based on my feeling. Feeling is the most important qualification for practicing talisman Taoism." Master Yensei gently stroked the sparse beard on his chin and lovingly looked at him. His laughter was hoarse and weird, like an old farmer who dug out antiques in his backyard. He said, "You are very sensitive, more sensitive than I thought. I like it very much." Ninkei did not know how to answer. "The flow of the qi of heaven and earth you feel is the smell of wind, because what I drew on the carriage is the talisman of wind." Master Yensei looked at him and said, "As for why the wind goes in a fixed route and why it has such a regular pattern, in your words, it is in a complete system. The reason is very simple, because the talisman determines the direction for it. Follow me." Master Yensei flicked his sleeves and slowly walked to the poplar tree in the pavilion beside the road with his hands behind his back. Ninkei walked to the horse in front of the carriage, looked at its big black eyes and said with a smile, "You must be the most comfortable horse in the world." The horse gently snorted and lowered its head to chew the hay in the bag. It silently agreed with this statement. Ninkei looked at the back of Master Yensei and quickened his pace to follow him. Master Yensei sat in the center of the pavilion with his legs crossed. A small charcoal stove and a tea set appeared beside him. Ninkei walked into the pavilion and saw the master was preparing to make tea by himself. He hurried to take over the task. Although it was the divine talisman master who cried to accept him as a disciple that day, he would never be so arrogant to miss this opportunity to serve the master and please him. The water was boiling and the tea was fragrant. Master Yensei looked at Ninkei, who was quietly serving tea, and nodded with appreciation. He tapped the tea tray with his index finger to indicate Ninkei to sit down and said, "There are many ways of cultivation, such as swordsmanship, body skills, and tactical arrays. Our ability to draw talismans is generally called talisman skill, but we don't call it that. We call it talisman Taoism." Ninkei respectfully put the teacup in front of the master and sat still and listened carefully. Master Yensei picked up the teacup and took a sip. He asked, "Do you know what talisman Taoism means?" Ninkei pondered for a moment and tentatively asked, "Entering Tao by talisman?" "Ha ha ha ha!" Master Yensei laughed and looked at him. He shook his head and said, "Everyone wants to enter Tao by seeking Tao. They enter Tao by swordsmanship, killing and love. Even the West Hill Divine Palace can't get rid of this mode of thinking, let alone you. But what about the Tao in the mortal world? The supreme Tao is illusory. How can we find it? The meaning of talisman Taoism is actually very simple. That is, entering Tao by talisman Taoism." Entering Tao by talisman Taoism? Ninkei wondered what it meant, but he couldn't figure it out. What is talisman? Talisman is a pattern, a line and a trace. Master Yensei gradually stopped smiling and looked at him seriously. He said, "The trace of a snake crawling over the sand is a talisman. The veins among the dead leaves are talismans. The ruts left on the muddy ground are talismans." The blood vessels of beasts are talismans. The trace of water flowing is talisman. The trace of wind blowing is talisman. The crack on the dry earth is talisman. The cloud in the blue sky is also talisman. It was a very simple and clear statement. Ning Ke was shocked and speechless for a long time. According to Master Yen Sei, all traces in the world were talismans. This idea had completely exceeded his realm of thinking. After a long silence, he asked, "Master, is drawing talisman imitating all traces in nature?" Master Yen Sei was slightly stunned. He looked at him and said with a smile, "That's a painter, not a talisman master." A few green leaves were blown off the branches by the wind on the side of the road, but before they fell into the slightly wet field, they were picked up by a gust of wind and gently floated to the top of the pavilion. They fell on the tiles that had been washed dark by the rain, and made a few light popping sounds. The blood vessels of beasts are talismans. This kind of talisman can only maintain their survival. The trace of water flowing is talisman. This kind of talisman can only make them go from high to low according to the decree of Haotian. The veins among the dead leaves are talisman. This kind of talisman can only make them pour the nutrients and water absorbed by their roots into the leaves, as they have done for hundreds of millions of years. Master Yen Sei calmly said, "These talismans are all natural talismans. They are born in nature and wither in nature. They coexist with the chi of heaven and earth, just like the truth that each of us lives in this world." However, whether human beings cultivate or study talisman Taoism, they have already exceeded the original mission of human beings in the world. That is to say, it has exceeded the need of survival. Therefore, the real meaning of talisman Taoism must come from nature, but must be higher than nature. Ning Ke listened silently. He faintly felt that although the master was talking about talisman Taoism, it contained a lot of great truth. Master Yen Sei drank up the remaining tea in the cup, looked at him and continued to say, "The talismans that come from nature but are higher than nature must go through several processes: copying, understanding, induction, simplification, purification, and interest. The so-called talismans are the lines and traces that human beings have learned and extracted from the talismans of nature for countless years." Ning Ke filled the teacup for the master and sat back to ask, "Then what is Tao?" "Tao is to know." "Let who know?" "Let the chi of heaven and earth know." Ning Ke was stunned and asked confusedly, "Let the chi of heaven and earth know what?" Master Yen Sei looked at him with a smile and said, "Let the chi of heaven and earth know what we want to do. All the means of human cultivation are inseparable from the control of the chi of heaven and earth. Controlling the chi of heaven and earth with swordsmanship and controlling the flying sword by psyche power is too indirect after all. Although the psyche master directly controls the chi of heaven and earth to attack the enemy, it is too simple and can only attack the opponent's sense of perception. Only talisman Taoism is between the two, but its state is higher than the two, because the ultimate goal of talisman Taoism is to tell the chi of heaven and earth what you want to do, and then the chi of heaven and earth will help you do it. The chi of heaven and earth has no eyes and ears, so it can never know what kind of strange ideas you have in your sense of perception. It is even more impossible for it to know that you want to condense the rain into thousands of sharp invisible knives, so how can you let it know what you mean? Talisman is the bridge between the human psyche power and the chi of heaven and earth. The talisman master condenses the chi of heaven and earth into these lines and traces with psyche power. Once it is stimulated, it can resonate with the surrounding chi of heaven and earth, and then it can make the wind rise, the water move, the clouds appear and disappear, and the sky dry. Ning Ke vaguely grasped the key of the problem. Master Yen Sei looked at the expression on his face and asked, "You seem to understand something. I once heard from a friend that the ocean of chi and mountain of snow in the human body is like a musical instrument, and the psyche power is the air. Only when it is blown into the instrument can it become a beautiful music, and then the qi of heaven and earth can understand it and resonate with it. Ning Ke looked at Master Yen Sei and said, "According to your previous explanation, I think that since talisman Taoism uses Fu to tell the qi of heaven and earth what you want to do, can it be said that Fu is equivalent to the ocean of qi and mountain of snow in our body? Your friend's state is very high, and his explanation is very clever." Master Yen Sei looked at him with a smile and said, "Of course, you are also worth teaching. The acupoints of the ocean of qi and mountain of snow in your body are too few, so it is very troublesome to cultivate swordsmanship or other things. But talisman Taoism is different. As long as you can perceive the qi of heaven and earth, you can perceive the subtle differences between them, and then record them with Fu and resonate with them, you can succeed." Ning Ke asked with confusion, "Since the talisman master has been learning and recording the talisman of nature for thousands of years, is there no ready-made Fu? If there are the current Fu, can I cultivate talisman Taoism without perceiving the fluctuation of the qi of heaven and earth?" Master Yen Sei laughed, gently stroked his beard and asked, "Are there two identical leaves in the world?" Ning Ke thought that if he asked about eggs, he would really doubt whether he was Da Vinci or not, so he answered, "No." "Then is it possible for there to be two identical people in the world?" "Of course not. In this case, you can't be me, and your psyche power can't be the same as mine. Then why can the qi of heaven and earth know that they are the same when you write the same Fu?" Ning Ke didn't understand at all. Master Yen Sei looked at him and said calmly, "For Talisman Master, our psyche power is like countless different words, and the so-called Fu is the combination of these words. The problem is that I am from Chang, and who speaks the official language, while you are from the South Sea, who speaks the Fire Lu language. We put our words into the same combination, so it is absolutely impossible for us to write the same article. There may be only dozens of languages in the world, but the psyche power of each talisman master is a completely different language. I made a Fu of 4-6, and the qi of heaven and earth can hear the impassioned words in it. You also made a Fu of 4-6, and the qi of heaven and earth can read it, but the qi of heaven and earth is at a loss, wondering why this guy's words are so incoherent and what does he want to say?" Ning Ke understood and bowed deeply to Master Yen Sei, expressing his gratitude. There were settings in my previous novels, but the worldview was very crude. If I could avoid it, I would avoid it. I didn't avoid it in this Showa-yi from the beginning. I think it's very courageous and bold to do so, and I firmly believe that this illusory world is self-justifying. Just like today's chapter, maybe it is only 4,000 words in your eyes, but such 4,000 words are much more difficult to write than the 10,000 words when I was climbing the mountain. I am proud of myself when I write it. I know many people don't like to see me being narcissistic and long-winded, so don't look at me. I can't suppress my pride. Except for a few days of self-doubt every month, for most of my life, I always feel that I am great at writing novels and making up stories, but I don't like to cast pearls before swine. Since I am such a bright big white pig, I am very afraid that you can't see my whiteness, my fatness, and my goodness, so I can't help but often jump out to remind you of my greatness. Finally, I want to flatter you. You like to read my novels and make up stories, which shows that your appreciation ability is also very great. Good night. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for recommendation or monthly vote. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 173. Ning Ke looked at the half cup of cold tea in front of him and concentrated on thinking about the master's words at this time. Master Yen Sei smiled slightly and raised his skinny arm. He simply drew something in the air in front of him with his index finger. The air in the pavilion suddenly became dry. A weak flame magically appeared in front of Ning Ke and then disappeared with a poof. He was so scared that he almost jumped up from the ground. Master Yen Sei smiled and said, Your friends said that the snow mountain and ocean of Qi are strings. The lines of talisman can also be regarded as strings. You can play a song that heaven and earth can understand. But I still think it is more accurate to describe it as an article. Talisman can not only let heaven and earth understand the beauty of the melody, but also can express ideas more clearly and find more subtle differences besides movement and stillness. After saying this, Master Yen Sei raised his right hand again and drew 6 lines in the air with his index finger. Ning Kei only felt a wave of wetness rising from the air drawn by the master's finger, and then coming to his face. With a light "pa" sound, he subconsciously reached out to touch it, and found that his face was wet, as if he had just washed it. Different psyche power and different lines can be used to write a completely different article and cause completely different effects. Master Yen Sei looked at Ning Kei, who kept touching his face like an infatuated fool, and said with a smile, "I teach you talisman Taoism to teach you how to write an article." How to write an article? After learning the classics of predecessors and perceiving the law of the Qi of heaven and earth, how to write the last stroke on the paper and let the Qi of heaven and earth know your mind. There is no other trick in the last step, or it can only be a trick. What does the word trick mean? It refers to talent. If you can write it, you can write it. If you can't, even if you don't sleep day and night and immerse yourself in the ink pool of the river, you still can't write it. Master Yen Sei looked at Ning Kei and said, "The last stroke of talisman Taoism depends on talent. Talent is the most precious gift that Haotian gives us. Only a few people can have this kind of luck, and you have this kind of luck. This seems to be too difficult." Ning Kei's emotions were somewhat at a loss. He had seen a miracle, but he did not know how the miracle had happened. The master had talked and talked, but in the end, he still walked back to the old path of metaphysics. He did not hear any operational guidance. Talent was something that could not be explained clearly, not to mention using this kind of unclear thing to achieve the most crucial stroke. If talisman Taoism ultimately depends on talent, then the first cultivator who discovered talisman Taoism in the world saw the traces of talisman lines between heaven and earth, subconsciously copied them, and wrote the first talisman. According to you, talisman Taoism can't be inherited, then how could he deliberated over his words and continued, pass on this civilization? Master Yen Sei pondered for a moment and said, "Although talisman Taoism can't be inherited, the spirit of talisman Taoism can be inherited. Words can record thoughts, and the past can be recorded. How did the earliest talisman master discover and write the first talisman? It must be a kind of coincidence. Perhaps tens of thousands of years ago, the grand cultivator walked to some kind of cliff, looked at the crack of the mountain rock, and suddenly felt something. He concentrated his spirit in the sword at his waist, and casually waved it to condense the primordial Qi of the cliff into it. The first talisman must be a coincidence and a spontaneous existence. When the grand cultivator found the secret contained in those sword marks, he would definitely try again. If he succeeded again, the second talisman would no longer be a coincidence, but a conscious existence." Ning Kei asked, "But it is also possible that the cultivator did not write the second talisman in his life." Master Yen Sei looked at him and said, "If the first cultivator did not succeed, there would be a second cultivator, a third and a fourth cultivator. The beginning of heaven and earth is endless, and cultivators are endless. They keep exploring the secrets of the world, so there must be a successful and conscious predecessor, which is undoubtedly inevitable." Ning Kei nodded and accepted the advice. Master Yen Sei said, "The same principle is that talisman Taoism can't be inherited, but the spirit of talisman Taoism can be inherited." Before the cultivator died, he would definitely tell his disciple, and his disciple would try again. He might succeed, or he might fail, and it was even possible that the lineage would be cut off. But I believe that after countless years, there will be another grand cultivator who finds the secret of talisman Taoism and passes it on to his disciple. That disciple will try again. If he succeeds, the lineage will be inherited again, until finally there is a lineage that succeeds, and the lineage has been inherited until today. Ninkei raised his head and said with emotion, "It's really a big wave washing away the sand. I don't know how many grand cultivators' skills have not been inherited. It's not a big wave washing away the sand, but more like climbing a mountain that can never be climbed to the top. Some people are forced to stop at the foot of the mountain, and some people climb to the mountainside, but are blown off the cliff by the mountain wind. Today, the inheritance of talisman Taoism has reached the peak now. But if you look into the future, you will know that this mountain is infinitely high." Master Yensei looked at him and sighed. "It's too difficult for talisman Taoism to appear. The word difficult can't describe the inheritance of talisman Taoism until today. It's like a tragic and stirring scene of a man guarding the pass. That's why I'm so excited when I find that you have potential. Since you are lucky to have this potential, you must cherish it not only for yourself but also for talisman Taoism itself." Ninkei heard the endless sorrow of vicissitudes, and his body became slightly stiff, as if he saw those pictures in countless years. In ancient times, a tribal wizard in animal skin came to a cliff cave to rest after presiding over a sacrificial ceremony. The tribal wizard sang an obscure song and picked up a red stone to draw a picture on the wall of the cave. The wizard wanted to describe that the fire was very good, very beautiful, and very red today. But he didn't expect that the painting was only half finished, and then it burned on the wall of the cave. The wizard screamed and fell to the ground in embarrassment. He kept kowtowing to the burning picture, and the animal skin on his buttocks kept trembling because of fear. The people in the tribe heard the wizard scream and rushed into the cliff cave. Then they also saw the burning picture, and knelt on the ground in fear, crying and shouting, thinking that it was some kind of evil worship. The wizard was the wisest person in the tribe. After he calmed down, he drove everyone out of the cliff cave. The burning picture gradually went out, and he looked at the remaining black marks on the wall of the cave. After hesitating for a long time, he nervously stretched out his fingers to touch it. Gradually his eyes brightened, and he turned around to find the red stone in the cave and tried to draw the picture again with trembling hands. After that day, the wizard could no longer draw the burning picture, but he had become the greatest wizard around the plateau. Countless people died in the war between the Central Plains and the wilderness. Blood soaked the black wilderness, soaking the grass and mud into something like chili. A practitioner from Min Mountain silently squatted in the wilderness, looking at the body of his brother in front of him. He held a branch in his hand, and drew on the blood and mud unconsciously. Not far behind him, the black and red wilderness seemed to come alive. It kept arching up and then scattered. Countless earthworms and insects panicked and scattered, as if there was a big mutated earthworm underneath. A disciple held the original Fu character left by his teacher, and kept copying on the yellow paper. He copied it from a teenager to an old man, until his hair turned white. The yellow paper behind him filled the whole room, and cobwebs formed on the beams. He kept copying. Someone sat on the high peak of Zhongli Mountain, holding a drawing board in his arms, and various colors of paint beside him. He looked at the clouds in the mountain, and painted from dawn to dusk, and then welcomed the sunrise. Winter passed, spring came, and summer came. He kept on drawing. From ancient times to the present, those who were extremely lucky or accidentally entered talisman Taoism, and those disciples who wanted to master talisman Taoism, kept on copying the traces between heaven and earth, and kept on thinking about the article in their hearts. They finished the paper in their rooms, used up their brushes, painted the rivers and mountains, and dyed the pools black. Maybe they succeeded, maybe they failed, but they had been working hard and trying. It was because of this kind of hard work and trying that the mysterious gift that Hao Yen had given to mankind was not completely taken back. It had been passed down to this day after danger. Every talisman master has the obligation to pass down what he has learned in his lifetime. Perhaps it can be said that this is a responsibility that we cannot refuse. Because those predecessors did exactly this. They exhausted all their strength and spirit to let the talisman Tao still exist in our world. Master Yen Sei looked at Ning Kai, who lowered his head and said with a dignified expression, "I am satisfied to have a successor like you. However, it is sad that the inheritance of talisman Taoism, as I said before, can only pass on the spirit, but cannot pass on the technique. So whether the spirit of talisman Taoism will not be cut off by me, depends on you." Ning Kai bowed to him and said, "I will try my best not to let you down." Disappointed? What is disappointed? If I only hope that you can pass on talisman Taoism, then I believe you will not let me down, because I have a pair of divine talisman master's eyes. I know it is not difficult for you. But my hope for you is not limited to this. I always think that there is a kind of power that limits the inheritance of talisman Taoism. You know, including me, no divine talisman master in the world can really see through talisman Taoism. Since we can't see through it, naturally we can't pass on the core and also the simplest truth of talisman Taoism. I am too old to cross that threshold. If you have the opportunity to cross that threshold in the future, then I believe that the inheritance of talisman Taoism will become an easy thing. At that time, with talisman Taoism, you can create mountains and rivers by waving your hands. It sounds like a miracle, but I firmly believe that one day people can do it, and it should be something that talisman Taoism must do. Master Yen Sei looked at him and said quietly, "Ning Kai, I hope you can become such a person. The greater the disappointment, the greater the hope." If Ning Kai didn't want to let Master Yen Sei down, he had to carry this heavy hope. He looked at the opposite side and felt that there were two mountains on his shoulders. "Can I become such a person?" "You have to become such a person." Ning Kai looked at the old and sad face of Master Yen Sei and suddenly said, "Master, please tell me the most basic thing." Master Yen Sei stared at Ning Kai's eyes for a long time. The emotion on his wrinkled face disappeared, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. He comforted Ning Kai and said softly, "The journey of thousands of miles starts with your feet. I wish you a pleasant journey." How can I draw a talisman? First of all, you have to feel the qi of heaven and earth, the more delicate the better. Then, according to what you see, you can draw the traces of the qi of heaven and earth. How can I draw if I can't see it? Cultivators never see the world with their eyes. That's the feeling. Yes, draw according to your feeling. Can I draw randomly? Then you should poke your eyes to blind first. Master Yen Sei stared at him angrily, took out a few books from behind and threw them to him. Ning Kai was almost smashed to death. Because what he caught was not just a few books, but dozens of books. Each book was very thick, and together they seemed to be heavier than Chun Pipi. He didn't know when the old Taoist secretly moved them from the carriage. Ning Kai picked up a book and opened it. Looking at the meandering lines on the front page, he found that they were not words, and they were so ugly that they could not even be called abstract paintings. He asked blankly, "Are these talismans?" "Yes, these are the talismans I have collected in my life, most of which are Taoist talismans." Master Yen Sei poured a cup of tea for himself to moisten his throat, and then he raised his head and continued, "These are the crystallization of the wisdom of the predecessors. When you study the traces of heaven and earth, don't forget to refer to these talismans. As I said before, these are the articles written by the talisman masters of the previous generation with their characters. Even if you are good at plagiarizing and can write all the models from memory, the marking teacher still can't understand them." Ning Kai regretfully said, "I know, the marking teacher's surname is Tian and his given name is D, and he is illiterate. Then he asked confusedly, "Since I can't plagiarize, what's the use of learning these talismans of the previous generation?" Just like perceiving the nature talismans of heaven and earth, these talismans are just for reference. You can't be bound by these traces, but should forget these traces through observation, comprehend their spirit, and finally find your own suitable traces. Forget the traces and comprehend the spirit? Isn't this the same as forgetting the form and comprehending the meaning? Ning Ke suddenly thought of the process of reading books in the old library this year, and could not help but be shocked speechless. It turned out that the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong that he made should be used at this moment. Master Yen Sei saw his shocked expression, frowned and asked. After a moment of silence, Ning Ke honestly reported his past of reading books in the old library of the academy to the master, and also mentioned the origin of the chicken soup calligraphy. That day, I found that I could barely understand some of the characters left by the talisman masters by using the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong. Because of joy, I went to the house of red sleeves to drink to celebrate. As a result, I drank too much and wrote the chicken soup calligraphy. Probably because I was too drunk to think, I wrote all the strokes that I comprehended in the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong into that calligraphy, and then it caught your attention. After saying this, Ning Ke subconsciously turned his head to look at the sky outside the pavilion, wondering if there was really God's will in the unseen world. Master Yen Sei smiled and said, "It's not that Haotian chose you, but that you have the ability and talent to win this choice. Master, just now when you drew casually, a handful of clear water hit my face. I know it's a talisman, but can fingers draw talismans in the air? If every talisman master's talisman is unique, then every talisman should be absolutely the same. Perhaps it can be controlled by pen and ink, but how can it be controlled by a casual drawing? Even pen and ink can't guarantee that every talisman is exactly the same, because you use different paper, and the speed of ink is also different. Talismans move with the talisman master's mind, so the subtle difference is not too important. On the contrary, as long as this subtle difference is not against the will, it can often conform to the talisman master's psyche power at that time, and the effect is better." Master Yen Sei continued, "As for drawing talismans with fingers in the air, compared with pen and ink, it is more unstable. But the talisman master who can draw talismans without objects has already completely mastered his own psyche power. In other words, the previous drawing is different from the latter, but the final effect is exactly the same." Ning Ke asked, "What kind of talisman master can completely master his own psyche power and thus draw talismans without objects?" Master Yen Sei pointed to his nose and said with a smile, "Divine Talisman Master." Ning Ke was deeply shocked and frustrated. "I divide talismans into 2 kinds, definite and infinitive. Definite talismans rely on external objects, whether it is pen and ink engraving or sculpture. It takes a long time to draw talismans, but the final power is greater. Talismans without objects are infinitive, which can be completed in an instant, but the power is ordinary." Hearing the 2 words definite and infinitive, Ning Ke's mind was refreshed, and he thought of the familiar verb features, such as soil, 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 and so on. Then he immediately came to his senses, and remembered that he was learning talisman Taoism in the pavilion instead of learning English in the special class. He rubbed his face angrily and asked, "In this case, why do you still need to learn infinitive? It seems very difficult." Master Yen Sei looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "Talisman Taoism is indeed powerful, and cultivators in the same state, even psyche masters can't defeat talisman masters. But this is just a theory on paper. What if I really fight with other cultivators? Lu Bai's flying sword breaks through the air, and I have to look for pen and ink everywhere in a hurry? When I perceive the damn flying sword coming from the clouds, I only need to use my psyche power as ink, and then I can stop it by drawing talismans in the air. Then I can think of a way to draw talismans to fight back. At this time, what's the use of pen and ink? Listening to Master Yen Sei's proud and complacent explanation, Ning Ke felt that something was wrong. After a moment of hesitation, he asked curiously, Master, have you ever fought with Liu Bai, the Sage of Sword, who is the strongest in the world? Metaphorical. I mean metaphorical. Master Yen Sei roared angrily, but he thought in his heart, my arm was hurt by Liu Bai's sword, but I also erased half of his eyebrows. Would I tell you about this glorious record? If you don't want to be shot by the enemy's arrow when you just go to the battlefield, infinitive is a must. But you said before that only divine talisman masters can master the talisman of nothing. You are extremely talented in talisman Taoism, and you have met such a great talisman Taoism master like me. How difficult it is to become a divine talisman master. After going back, first memorize these pamphlets, and then carefully understand the Qi of heaven and earth. Ning Ke stared at the pile of thick books beside him, thinking that these were pamphlets. Master Yen Sei frowned and regretfully said, You are still in the no-doubt state, and you can only preliminarily understand the law of the flow of the Qi of heaven and earth. If you have already been in the see-through state, you can blend into the Qi of heaven and earth, or if you have simply entered the knowing destiny state and fundamentally mastered the law of the Qi of heaven and earth, plus your talent in talisman Taoism, it will be much easier to cross the first level. Ning Ke was speechless, thinking that if I can know destiny, why should I learn talisman Taoism so troublesome? Master, in your opinion, according to my talent, how many years can I become a divine talisman master like you? If you concentrate on talisman Taoism, you can leave the academy and follow me to the mountain to practice hard. About 10 years. Ning Ke sighed regretfully and said, 10 more years. Master Yen Sei angrily said, 10 years later, you are not yet 30 years old. If you can really become a divine talisman master at that time, you can at least be ranked in the top 3 in the history of cultivation for 1,000 years. Don't you feel satisfied? Ning Ke was scolded and lowered his head. Of course, he didn't feel ashamed, but a little proud. He thought that his talent in talisman Taoism could be ranked in the top 3 in the history. After knowing this, would Chen Pippi feel ashamed? Master Yen Sei looked at Ning Ke's head, and his expression gradually became clear. He thought silently, Unfortunately, I am afraid that I can't teach you for 10 years. Ning Ke suddenly thought of a very important thing. He looked up at Master Yen Sei and said seriously, Master, since I am determined to learn talisman Taoism from you, should I change the way I call you teacher? After thinking for a moment, Master Yen Sei shook his head and said, Since you have entered the 2nd floor of the academy, the headmaster of the academy is your teacher. Then there is no second person in the world who is qualified to be your teacher. You can call me master. It sounds good. Ning Ke heard Master Yen Sei's respect for the headmaster of the academy. After a moment of silence, he said with a smile, Then how about calling me teacher? Master Yen Sei smiled slightly and thought that he was really a smart boy. Ning Ke was certainly smart. He had proved himself in his previous life, and he was constantly proving himself in this life. However, calling Master Yen Sei teacher had nothing to do with his inborn intelligence. It was the ability to observe people's words and flattery that had been tempered by years of difficult survival in the world. According to Master Yen Sei, there was no second person in the world who was qualified to be compared with the headmaster of the academy. The headmaster of the academy was now his teacher, and others were naturally embarrassed to be his teacher. But after listening to him for a long time in the pavilion, Ning Ke deeply felt that Master Yen Sei attached great importance to the inheritance of talisman Taoism and himself. Of course, he wanted to have a formal title of teacher and student. After I started to call Master Yen Sei Master, TSK, the atmosphere in the pavilion was really good. The teacher and the student were harmonious, talking and laughing. Master even gave me a gift for our first meeting. Why didn't he give me one in the beginning? In the old brush pen shop on Lynn 47th Street, Ning Kei sat in a round chair and held a teapot, like a storyteller. Sang Sang was repairing the shop door that was damaged the day before yesterday with a hammer and ignored him. Not getting a response, Ning Kei was a little bored and lectured, "Can't you pay attention to what I say?" Sang Sang was measuring the size of the plank that she asked from the carpenter's shop during the day. She answered, "I am busy." Ning Kei said angrily, Your young master, will become a legendary divine talisman master in 10 years. Why are you not excited at all?" Sang Sang turned back and looked at him, saying, "Young master, that will happen in 10 years. But we must repair the door today." Ning Kei put the teapot on the table and said, "Don't repair it. Go buy something for me first." Sang Sang asked confusedly, "What are you in a hurry to buy at this time? The door hasn't been repaired yet." Brush, ink, cinnabar, and other messy materials. Ning Kei wrote a note and handed it to her, saying, 10 years to become a divine talisman master is really too slow. I want to start learning talisman Taoism right now. Seize every minute. Seize every minute." Sang Sang opened her bright willow-shaped eyes and looked at him who was dancing with joy. She hesitated and called, "Young master." "Yes, what's up? Are you confused because of happiness?" "Maybe a little. First of all, I strongly want the monthly vote. If I don't want it, it will be unjustifiable. Please vote your monthly vote. I promise you that Ning Kei will become a divine talisman master within 2 years. These words really deserve to be slapped. Slap me with the monthly vote. Secondly, tomorrow is the birthday of my eldest daughter, Tang Tang. My leader and I wish her a happy birthday. Don't be silly, be sensible, and be healthy and happy. At the same time, tomorrow is the birthday of my daughter, Lon Lon. My leader and I also wish her a happy birthday. Don't be silly, take more beautiful photos and less Photoshop, and be healthy and beautiful. Thirdly, I have been holding back the fact that tomorrow is the birthday of the most beautiful woman in the world. That woman is my mother. I will call her tomorrow and tell her some mushy words. I won't say anything else. I don't know what good day tomorrow will be. I think it over and over again. Tomorrow is Saturday, a good day to rest. I will go out and drink with my friends. I am so happy. I wish you all a good weekend. Finally, I seriously recommend a new book, vivid and lively. The book number is 219-1385. The author is Zhu Jiaozhu. The quality of the book is guaranteed by books such as Shaoxian is Poisonous and Moving Mountains. I feel very comfortable and at ease when I recommend it. P.S. This is the revised version of 201112170114. I have corrected some typos and some terrible omissions. Haha. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.